Court calls cause number 23-09-28697-CB in the interest of Scarlett Harris Powell et al. In the 454th Judicial District Court of Medina County, Texas. Court is broadcasting via Zoom and YouTube outside of Medina County. Are there any objections?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right. With that, Mr. McKeska, would you please begin the announcements?
Yes, Judge. Drake McKeska, attorney for the department.
Christy Knott, permanency supervisor with Belong.
Catherine Shove, permanency supervisor with Belong.
Kimberly Hernandez, permanency caseworker with Belong.
Richard Sullivan, attorney for Mr. Roscoe. We're ready, Judge.
Brandon
Deborah.
Wong.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Deborah.
Deborah Fuller, attorney and guardian ad litem for the children. Ready, Your Honor.
Brandon Wong, attorney for Grace Bence. Not ready, Your Honor.
Lana Pearsall, attorney for Miles Benz, who's present and we're ready. Mr. Benz, can you unmute and introduce yourself?
Miles Benz, Paisley's father.
And we're ready.
Joe Roden, Tri-County CASA.
Anyone who's not an attorney or will be giving testimony, please raise your right hand. And all the parents to raise their right hand, please. Do each of you swear or affirm the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor.
Thank you. We're here for a final trial. Mr. Wong has announced not ready. I'm aware that there was a motion filed Friday. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right. Are there any other motions that we need to take up this morning before the final trial?
Not that I'm aware of, Judge.
Okay. Let me go ahead and hear from you, Mr. Wong, on your motion and what you're seeking today.
Yes, Judge. We're seeking a continuance and extension of the trial setting for an extra 6 months or 180 days. There have been a significant change of events and circumstances for how this case was pending for the entire duration. My client has been always under the impression and been told, especially in my office from the CPS caseworkers, that this case was always on a reunification path, which included herself. At the time of mediation, it was stated that that is not the case, and it was explained that her rights were going to be terminated, and that is highly contradictory to what we have been preparing for the duration, Your Honor. The most recent orders in place all state reunification with the family, and now that they're alleging that it should be termination. Additionally, Your Honor, my office has requested the file from CPS since I got in the case back in May of this year, and we were finally able to get approximately 3,500 pages of documents from CPS approximately a week and a half ago. And so, of course, we need additional time to prepare and go through all of the CPS file for my client. Considering this is a now termination case, we'd also ask, Your Honor, that we have always been under the impression that the cases were going to be split up with Paisley and Scarlett, because there's additional things that need to be done with Paisley, as far as my client was supposed to get reunification, have unsupervised visits, move into visits, etc., and that has not occurred. And then more recently with Scarlett, there has been communication from Scarlett to my client through various social media accounts, saying that she wants access, wants
You
to
don't
talk.
have no object to hearsay.
Well, I just want to hear what the argument is, what you would propose to present. So
Right.
We'll get into the specifics of what she said. Just tell me what you would show.
Of course, Your Honor. We would show that there is no outstanding harm for the case being continued, for both cases being continued for another 6 months so Ms. Benz can further go through the therapeutic process, finish all the CPS classes, for the kids to go through the therapeutic process, because termination should be the last thing on the list. And, it's kind of the last resort decision that should occur. And so again, Your Honor, my client has been completing and has been attending all of the classes. She has a handful of classes left for the BIP program. It has also, the evidence will show that the child, through her current counselor, Dr. Yates, has expressed an interest to speak with her mother, because at the prior hearing, it was told that she did not want to have any contact. And
Objection, per se, Judge.
All right,
I'm just going with what the facts
Your Honor, I think
show.
I think Mr. Wong is providing testimony, and evidence that needs to be done by witnesses and not by his own testimony, and his testimony is not accurate either.
Again, Your Honor,
hang on. I think I get the gist of what you're wanting in your motion. That's really what I was looking for. It sounds like your client is requesting the court to extend the case basically due to big ticket issues were being the client arguing that she's unaware that she was on a termination track. You just got a 3,000-page file that you've been requesting, and you're asking time to review that. And you believe that the track of these cases is it's incongruent with termination at this time, and you're asking for more time to delve more into some of the things that we've been talking about, including at the last hearing. So that's my understanding of the motion for extensions, and that's essentially what you're arguing, is it not?
That is correct, Judge.
Okay. I'm going to give everybody a chance to respond. We'll start with the department. Mr. McKeska?
Judge, this is probably one of the toughest cases that I've come across regarding the issues at hand and the two separate children and the fathers in the case. It is the department's request today that we move forward with trial with regard to Scarlett. She is in her placement with her father. She's been there for a while. And we believe it's in her best interest to move forward with the final hearing. We would be prepared to move forward with regard to Paisley as well. The child is on track to enter into a monitored return with her father. And so we would ask that, we'd be able to do that. But also believing that maybe dealing with the mother's, conservatorship of both children, her rights to both children, for sake of judicial economy, be handled together.
Is the department seeking termination of the mother's rights, considering there's a term or proposed monetary return with Mr. Benz?
That has been one of the things that have been discussed. Yes, Judge.
So you are seeking it?
If we were to move forward with trial, that would be our position today. Yes.
Mr. Salawar?
Judge, we'd object. We want to move forward on trial. I believe the motions were not timely filed. I don't believe the petition was also timely filed, Judge. So we'd object to notice on that. And we want to move forward, Judge. She's had enough time to work her services. We need permanency for the children at this point, especially my client who's had the child in his home, Judge. So we'd want to request trial to proceed today.
Pearsall?
Judge, I agree with honestly not Mr. Wong, but with what everybody else said. We absolutely need to move forward to trial. I agree with Mr. McKeska. He said, I wrote it down, that this is the toughest case. We do CPS cases, and they are unique, and they work with really traumatic, unusual issues. And the fact that I think all of us think this is one of the most difficult and extreme cases we've ever worked says a lot. There is absolute harm in doing anything but moving forward this trial today. One, this motion for continuance and extension was not timely filed or served on any of the attorneys or parties. Two, it requires a showing of extraordinary circumstances, and there are just none. What makes this case tough and isn't the cause for extraordinary circumstances is mother's continued behavior throughout this case. This court has heard through many, many hearings how she has scared the kids, how kids in a very unusual way don't even want to communicate with her, how she has broken and trashed my client's house, how she has filed false charges against him, by the way, she still continues to do. She has falsely involved the police and the fire department where he works. Her level of constant, illegal, dishonest harassment is something I've never seen in 25 years of practice. So there is absolute harm. And honestly, Judge, if we do anything but move forward with this case, I'm afraid I'll see my client on the news as the next dead victim. So I'm asking that we go forward today for these children's safety and for all of the fathers' safety.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller.
Your Honor, I'll start with the surprise of termination. I don't know how that could be a surprise. Her child was sent, Scarlett was sent to live with Mr. Roscoe months ago in March. Then all communication was cut off as well. The concurrent plan has always been adoption, and Mr. Roscoe was able to meet all of her needs. And so she should have been fully aware with Scarlett that the plan was termination. So to come in today and say that she just was made aware of that, if you see the court reports, they all say reunification, then concurrent plan, adoption. And my client, Miss Scarlett, the oldest child, didn't want any contact with her mother. She did reach out, and Miss Bentz didn't even tell anybody that she talked to her. You know, it came from somebody else. So even though you ordered her not to have any contact with Scarlett, there was contact, and she didn't tell anybody. We found out through a third party that she had contact. So that's really concerning to me. And as Ms. Pearsall said, you've heard so much evidence of Ms. Bentz's continued behavior that is so alarming in a case. And again, I've been doing these cases for 30 years, and to see the type of activity that Ms. Bentz will engage in with the children, threaten their lives, threaten these fathers. I mean, I don't know how she wouldn't understand that termination was on the table. Mr. Wong filed pleadings late. They're not, so he has no pleadings on file. He had to file them 10 days before the hearing. He filed the motion for continuance late. This case needs to go forward because these children need permanency, and they need to be able to move forward from what they've endured. Scarlett especially has endured horrific abuse, emotional, physical, at the hands of Miss Bentz. I mean, it's the worst type of emotional abuse I've seen in the years that I've been doing these cases. And we need to move forward with that. And with Paisley, the harm that Miss Bentz has committed on all these children, especially young children, you know, the worry is that Paisley wouldn't survive. She's a baby. She's barely a year old. And Miss Bentz is a very unstable, unpredictable individual. She has not been able to overcome any of the issues that brought us into care. And I'm really worried for the lives of these children and for the fathers, because she has gone so far as to threaten and to file charges and to do all these things to try to make them change their mind or make something happen in her favor. And it's just, it's sickening. And we need to go forward, and her rights need to be terminated. And I think she should have known that was the case. I don't know how it's a surprise.
Thank you. Before I hear from Casa and then give Mr. Wong a rebuttal, Mr. McKeska, one of the arguments that Mr. Wong made was the file. I think I heard him say that he had been requesting it since May and had just received it last week. And it's over 3,000 pages. What's your response to that?
So, Judge, I don't know when the file was requested. I'm picking this case up at the 11th hour. Whenever I was looking through the file during and after mediation, I saw the redacted case file had been prepared, which tells me that someone requested it at some point in time. And so I asked Ms. Ortiz to send it to Mr. Wong's office upon seeing it in the file, and that's what we did. If it was requested by a party earlier in the case, then I mean, I defer to the other parties who have the historical knowledge of this. Then it would have been provided originally. I know that Mr. Wong came onto this case kind of late in the game. And so the file may have been provided to Ms. Spence prior to that, to her prior attorney. I don't know. All I can say is that I saw it in the file and that we submitted it to him upon discovering it.
Okay.
Your Honor, if I can add to that, the CPS redacted file was provided to all attorneys of record on May 23rd of 2024. So all attorneys had it for all parties.
Okay. Who was Miss Spence's attorney at that time?
I'm not really sure, Your Honor. This is her fourth attorney. Irene Acosta was the attorney prior to Mr. Wong.
And Your Honor, I can tell you we did not have the file back in May. And I have reached out to my office, I will say, has reached out to prior attorneys, and we have not received any documents from them.
Well, our records show an initial appearance, or substitution, I guess, by your office, Mr. Wong, on May 14th. Does anybody else have any information? Ms. Pearsall stated that the identified file was provided May 23. Does anybody else have any other information on that?
Judge, I can tell you I was not provided with that file. And if I'm searching my emails right now for everything from CPS related to this Spence matter. And this the first time that we got the file was approximately a week and a half ago.
Okay.
And I doubt if it would have been sent through email, Your Honor, not 3,500 pages. They usually send the flash drive.
Right. And we definitely didn't get a flash drive. And we did get this file through email because they made a link that we were able to download.
Yeah, it's a link that comes through. It's not an email. It's like a link that we get.
Right, but if we got it through email, through a link.
What is controlling here is mitigation. So when did you request the file again, Mr. Wong?
We've been requesting the file essentially continuously when we've been meeting with the CPS workers. And so again, we did request it the last time at mediation, where they even had said that we will agree to give it to you, but we're not going to put it in the mediation report that we agree to give you the redacted file.
Your Honor, I'm sorry. Mediation is confidential, and providing that information to the court is against the rules.
Well, hang on. Did you submit any formal requests to the department, Mr. Wong, since May 14th?
So I can look through my file, Judge, but it is our fairly standard procedure. When we get involved in a case, we send a standard form letter requesting all the file for the entire case.
What I want you to do, it's 11:06. I want you to take 10 minutes and look for your requests, because in my opinion, there's a very compulsory feeling that I have right now that we need to move forward. But if you can show that your attempts to procure a 3,000-page file have been ignored for 4 months, then I'll consider that. But I need to see some evidence of that. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to look for it. We'll be back at 11:17.
A few minutes later.
Sorry, Judge. So I have in my...
Hang on, just let me make sure Ms. Esslinger is ready. Ms. Esslinger, are you ready? Okay. Go ahead.
Judge, I show in my file notes that we reached out back on May 10th, on July 16th, regarding the file. I do show we did receive partial file, but it only included 85 documents. I did not, I can tell the court that it is not, those 85 documents are definitely not the 3,500 pages of reports that we received a week and a half ago. So again, Your Honor, we did not receive the complete file as requested, and we have made numerous requests. There have been a number of different caseworkers, which I understand occurs, and that could be part of the issue of getting the file. And just, again, Your Honor, we'd ask that we'd have time to actually review the entire case file.
Do you have any copies of formal requests made to?
I have some emails, Your Honor, and I do have emails from CPS responding back with the files. And so, yes, I do have the emails, but of course that is for the earlier request. But the continuing request, those have been made, and I do have notes in our files, and I do have emails, of course, saying that they'll call us back and give us information.
And Judge, while we were in recess, I was also doing some digging. Miss Ortiz was able to locate an email from the software program that we use. It's the best way to describe it is a secure Dropbox program. Whenever we create the package that gets sent out to the parties, it creates a link that's active for 7 days. If a party doesn't access the information within that 7 days, then the package is deleted and that link is deactivated. So we do have an email from May 31st of 2024 that shows the deactivated link. In that email, it also shows all of the email addresses that did not open the file. The only attorney or the only parties that were included on the email that opened it were Ms. Schoaf and Ms. Savage at the time. But everybody else's emails, including Mr. Wong's, is included on that email showing that it wasn't opened whenever it was sent back in May.
Was that email to a link that would have included the information that was provided last week?
Yes, Judge. That it would have been that was the redacted file that was sent back in mid-May, like I say, or towards the end of May. Probably May 24th is when the email would have been sent, since it had a deactivation date of the 31st, which would have been 7 days later.
Can I get the email address that was sent from so I can search that in my inboxes? Because it could have gone in my junk or spam. That's the issue.
Sure.
Well,
so
and Judge, if I can add,
let him give the email address so that we can.
Yeah, it's
Mr.
Brandon.
Wong, are you okay with him stating the email address in open court?
Not my email address, but the sender. If I could get the sender, then I can search that to see if that actually came to my inbox or if it came to my spam.
The sender is probably going to be the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services notification service.
While he's looking for that, Ms. Pearsall, what were you going to say?
Your Honor, I found that email specifically while we were talking. It was generated on behalf of that mailbox by Ms. Ortiz, Lorraine Ortiz, who works for Mr. McKeska's office. I confirmed with her during the break that it was set to myself and specifically to Mr. Wong in the same link. And what Mr. Wong is saying, what he did get at some point was, some sort of partial documents, but I can tell you it's 3,593 pages, which is exactly what he's complaining he received again, but that was sent out to all attorneys on May 23rd. And Judge, if we don't open the email, I don't know how we can blame anybody else for that.
No,
And Your Honor, I did
on
want to add something, Your Honor. When Mr. Wong said that we had mediation recently, and so it was a surprise, it was termination. We actually had a mediation scheduled and everybody attended except Ms. Spence on July 30th. And it was made very clear at that time that termination was the plan. We had to reset it because Ms. Spence was not able to attend. And so then we had it on the 15th of August. So he was fully aware on July 30th because we did attend that mediation for at least an hour discussing what the plan was. So to say that he was only made aware last week is not true.
Judge, and again, the reason that Ms. Spence wasn't, to add context, there's a medical emergency. And again, there was nothing discussed with my client about termination because we didn't actually discuss anything about the case other than a reset date. And I can see in my inbox, Your Honor, I did get 2 emails from Lorraine. When she sent it from Lorraine, I got that one, Your Honor, on 8/19. The other did go to my spam box from May. I do see the one from May, but again, it's in my spam. But I got the one because for some whatever reason, one of them popped up as lorraine.ortiz@dfps.gov via tel something. The other popped up as Texas Department of Family Protective Services, and that went to the spam. I don't know why the inbox named them differently, but for whatever reason, one did go to spam, the other went to my inbox.
All right.
Fortunately, that's not a reason for a continuance.
Well, I don't want to put any more time into this. I wanted to give all the parties an adequate opportunity to state their position on this motion, because one of the things I heard, and I quoted it, was this is one of the most significant extreme cases we've ever worked. And I am aware of what's going on. And so the thought in my mind was, well, if it's the most significant extreme case we've ever worked, then I need to really think about whether or not we have extraordinary circumstances and whether or not we have best interests for a 263-401 motion. And based on what I've heard this morning and what I know about this case, and that's why I gave you the opportunity, Mr. Wong, I believe that the file was provided, and you have a duty to mitigate whatever issues might exist when it comes to discovery. I almost feel as if we're in a situation right now where we're waiting a long time to say I never got it. I understand that you followed up and you requested some things and you got answers, but I don't have any reason to question that the email was sent out back in May. There's no evidence that disputes. There's no contravening evidence that email was sent out. And, we're all custodians of our own email accounts, whether something's going to our inbox or our spam or our junk mail. I mean, that's on us. And so I don't believe that what I've heard this morning argued is going to rise to the level, even if I were to hear evidence about it, it's going to rise to the level of extraordinary circumstances. And from what other arguments I've heard from the people involved in this case, it doesn't sound like it's in the best interest for us to put this off. So motion's denied. I'm also going to find that the motion was not filed timely. It's supposed to be 3 days, and you can't include the day of the hearing. So if it was filed on Friday, I don't know that everybody had sufficient notice to prepare for an extension hearing this morning, is what I'm trying to say. I'm going to find there's no extraordinary circumstances and it's not in the best interest to extend, and we're going to move forward with trial this morning. What housekeeping issues do we need to take up before we begin?
Judge, I did send out copies of proposed exhibits last week. I haven't received any emails back regarding any sort of objections to those proposed exhibits. But if there aren't any sort of specific objections to those exhibits, I'd like to just be able to go ahead and introduce those. They're all documents that were filed in this case. So orders and family plans, everything that's part of the court file.
How many exhibits are there?
Let me look, Judge. I can't remember off the top of my head.
No objections, Your Honor. They're all certified orders.
No objection, Your Honor.
It's 7 exhibits in total, Judge.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and list them on the record, and then I'll give, sounds like we've had no objections from 3 attorneys, but I want to give Mr. Wong the opportunity to state any objections he might have.
No objection, Your Honor. It's the court's file.
Okay, well, then let's just list them, and I'll go ahead and admit them once I have them on the record.
Yes, sir. So petitioner's exhibit number 1, Judge, is a copy of the temporary order following the adversary hearing from October 16th, 2023 in this case. Petitioner's 2 is a copy of the family plan of service for Ms. Bentz, filed in this case. Petitioner's 3 is the copy of the family plan of service for Mr. Roscoe in this case. Petitioner's 4 is a copy of the family plan of service for Mr. Bentz, filed in this case. Petitioner's 5 is a copy of the status hearing order from this case. Petitioner's 6 is a copy of the initial permanency hearing order before final order from this case. And then petitioner 7 is the copy of the permanency hearing order before final order from May 14th in this case.
All right, having heard no objections, the court will admit petitioners 1 through 7. Anything else before we begin testimony?
No, Your Honor.
There you
Mr. McKesky, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Judge, I'd like to call Miss Catherine Show.
Ms. Show, you were sworn, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Ms. Show, can you please state your name for the record?
Catherine Schoaf,
And how are you currently employed?
a permanency supervisor with Belong.
And are you the current permanency, or sorry, you're a permanency supervisor with Belong? Prior to becoming a permanency supervisor, what was your role with Belong?
Permanency specialist.
Okay, and were you the permanency specialist that was assigned to this case?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and how long did you serve as the permanency specialist for this case?
All the way up till June of this year.
Okay, and when did you start as the permanency specialist?
It was from the onset of the case.
Okay. So you're familiar then with the reasons the children were removed in the first place?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall what the reasons for removal were?
Yes, sir. There was ongoing domestic violence. Miles and Grace Bentz had recently completed a family-based service case in July of 23 due to domestic violence. And then less than a month after it closed, law enforcement had begun getting calls for domestic violence and mental health concerns. Both parents were downplaying the incidents that had occurred. And most recently, at that time, the parents had an altercation in the vehicle with all 4 children present. There was concern the violence was escalating and putting the children at significant risk of immediate danger or harm. And they had given it time to provide a safety plan, but were failed to do so.
Okay. And following the filing of the petition, were you able to discuss the allegations with Miss Bentz and Mr. Bentz?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did they make any sort of admissions to you regarding the allegations of domestic violence?
At that time, no, they did not. They were, I'm sorry. Miles Spence did not. He stated there were issues in the home they were working on. Grace Spence stated that it was Miles that was exhibiting domestic violence in the home.
Okay. Following the removal of the children, did you work with the parents in order to develop a family plan of service?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, and let's start with Ms. Spence. What services were included on her family plan of service?
Random drug testing, a psychological evaluation, follow all recommendations, individual counseling and following recommendations, domestic violence classes, parenting classes, attend all her parent-child visits, obtain and maintain safe and stable housing, and obtain and maintain stable employment.
With regard to random drug testing, did you ask Ms. Spence to complete random drug testing?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And throughout the course of this case, were the use of controlled substance ever a concern for you?
No, sir. While she did test positive, she did show a prescription.
Okay. Was there ever a need in the course of this case to ask Ms. Spence to complete a drug and alcohol assessment?
No, sir.
You said she also was required to complete a psychological evaluation and follow recommendations. Did Ms. Spence complete that psychological evaluation?
Yes, she did.
Okay, do you recall when she completed it?
On January 1st of 24.
And who did she complete it with?
She completed it with Dr. Russell Thompson's office.
And were there any specific recommendations from that psychological evaluation?
That she can attend individual therapy and medication management.
With regard to individual counseling, was Ms. Spence referred to a counselor?
Yes, she was.
And who was she referred to?
Originally, she was referred to AB counseling on November 6th of 23.
And you said originally, did she not complete services with AB counseling?
She did not. She had one session she missed due to being incarcerated. And then the other visits were canceled due to Grace having someone else in the vehicle with her. And so she was unsuccessfully discharged.
Do you recall when she was unsuccessfully discharged?
It would have been on December 8th.
Following the referral for AB counseling, was she referred to someone else?
Yes, I sent a referral to Shonda Esparza on December 14th.
Okay, and did Ms. Spence complete services with Ms. Esparza?
Yes, she completed her first session on January 2nd, and throughout my portion was engaged with her.
Okay, and you said that you handed off the case in June of 2024, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so from your knowledge then, from January to June, Ms. Spence was engaged in individual counseling?
Yes, sir.
Regarding the domestic violence program, did you refer Ms. Spence to a domestic violence program?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and which domestic violence program did you refer her to?
I sent a referral to Family Violence Prevention Services on November 6th of 23.
And did you refer her to the victims or perpetrators program?
Perpetrators.
Okay, and did Ms. Spence complete that program with Family Violence Prevention Services?
During my portion, no, sir. She did not complete her initial assessment until April 26th of 24. And as of June 6th, she had attended 2 sessions with 2 classes missed. I'm sorry, attended 4 sessions with 2 sessions missed.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Ms. Shove?
Yes, as of June 6th, she had attended 4 sessions and missed 2 sessions.
Thank you.
Ms. Schuff, were there any complications getting her registered for the domestic violence program?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and what were those complications?
So on December 15th, Grace stated that she was not an offender and would not be participating in the class. She did complete her paperwork on February 3rd of 2024, completing the paperwork to start the class. However, her first session, which would have been her initial assessment, was scheduled for March 20th, but she had to cancel due to a work conflict and was put back on the wait list for April.
And did you discuss with Miss Bentz why she needed to complete the offenders program?
Yes, sir.
Okay, why was she referred to the offenders program?
Due to the amount of domestic violence in this case from the police records, it shows the violence was coming both parties. It wasn't just Grace Bentz, it was also Miles making the comments back and forth. There was also concerns with what Scarlett Powell had stated regarding a concern for anger with her mom and reporting an incident where her mother had attempted to drown her.
And so are you aware of why Miss Bentz was making the claim then that she was the victim and not a perpetrator of domestic violence?
She stated that she never attempted to drown Scarlett and that Miles was the person that was inflicting the domestic violence on her.
Earlier you said that there was a recommendation from a psychological evaluation for Miss Bentz to complete a medication management or to engage in medication management. Did you work on those services while you were the caseworker?
During that time, Grace Bentz had continued to inform me that she was seeing a doctor for medication management. And so she had already been taking care of that portion herself.
Okay. Did she ever provide any sort of documentation to you showing that she was engaging with a doctor in medication management?
She did. I have to look for it real quick. But she did not provide it till after my last meeting with her at the end of May.
Okay. So she also needed to complete a parenting program, is that correct?
That is correct.
While you're the caseworker, did Ms. Bentz successfully complete a parenting program?
Yes, she did on March 20th of 24.
Okay, and who was that service provider?
That was the San Antonio Fatherhood Campaign.
With regard to visitation, how often did Ms. Bentz have visitation with the children?
For Paisley, it was 1 hour every week. For Scarlett, it rotated when I had finished, visitation had been suspended until deemed appropriate by Scarlett's therapist. They were previously, prior to that, attending their parent-child visits virtually for an hour every week.
And were there any concerns based off of those visits?
There were concerns with Scarlett's visits, and Scarlett had brought this to my attention that during the visits, if Grace got upset and didn't like anything, she would say, "I'm going to call Katie," which Scarlett thought she had done something wrong, which is what she verbalized directly to me. Grace would get upset if she's told Scarlett, "I love you," over and over again, and Scarlett wouldn't reciprocate it, or that "I miss you." And it was just very emotional. The last visit, actually, both of Scarlett and Grace ended up in tears, and Scarlett refused to continue with the visit. We had to end the visit. And that's when Scarlett told me she did not want to have contact with her mother.
Let's talk about Mr. Roscoe. Did you plan or prepare a family plan of service for him?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, and what was on his family plan?
Psychological evaluation and follow recommendations, individual counseling, parenting classes, follow the rules and guidelines of his supervised relief, attend all his parent-child visits, obtain and maintain safe and stable housing, and obtain and maintain stable employment. Actually,
so let's jump back real quick to Miss Bentz. Housing and employment were also part of her family plan, correct?
That is correct.
And were there any concerns for Miss Bentz being able to satisfy that element of her family plan?
No, sir.
So she had appropriate housing and she was employed?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
So with regard to Mr. Roscoe's psychological evaluation, was he able to complete that?
Yes, he was.
And who did you complete it with?
He completed it with Michelle Moran,
And do you recall when he completed it?
December 1st of 23.
And were there any recommendations for services based off of that family plan?
And yes, sir. Individual counseling, random drug testing, evaluation in the home environment, employment, and parenting classes.
Okay, so the only recommendation outside of his current family plan or outside of his family plan was the drug testing element?
That is correct.
Okay. Were you able to discuss Mr. Roscoe's history regarding controlled substance use with him?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and did you have any concerns for any current substance abuse?
No, sir.
Did you send Mr. Roscoe for any sort of random drug testing?
I did not, as he was receiving the random drug testing through the supervised release.
Okay, you said he's for supervised released?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what was he unsupervised released for?
I want to say it was for wire fraud.
Okay. Were there any other recommendations from his family plan, or sorry, from his psychological evaluation?
No, sir.
Okay, with regard to individual counseling, did you refer him to individual counseling?
I did, yes, sir.
And who was he referred to?
He was originally referred to optimal counseling and to ABE counseling. However, neither of them could work out of state. So I did send a referral to him to Dr. Rachel Yates on February 6th.
And did he complete services with Dr. Yates?
He was engaged services throughout the duration of me being on there for the entire time.
Okay. Was he able to complete a parenting program?
Yes, he did.
And when did he complete that?
On October 21st of 23.
Has Mr. Roscoe been able to, prior to Scarlett's placement with him, was he able to attend visits with Scarlett?
Yes, he had virtual visits every week. And then he also did get to have a in-person visit supervised by his parents over the Christmas holiday.
Okay. And was Scarlett placed with Mr. Roscoe while you're the caseworker?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you just describe first what happened or what went into the decision by the department to place Scarlett with Mr. Roscoe?
Certainly. Mr. Roscoe had made great lengths in completing his service plan, showing that he did have a stable environment and wanted to be able to provide for his daughter. He had built his relationship up with Scarlett, and they were starting to actually cooperate more as father and daughter, and wanted to be able to provide Scarlett with stability, and so to be able to take care of her full time.
Okay. And do you recall when Scarlett was placed?
On March 13th of 24.
And did you complete the placement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you just describe for us what happened whenever you placed Scarlett with Mr. Roscoe?
Certainly. At first, Scarlett was very emotional. I stayed with her to calm her down and talk with her through it. Afterwards, then had dinner, and she was relaxed. She started interacting with Daniel and appeared to be comfortable. And at the end of dinner, she told me, "I think I'm going to be happy here. I'm going to like New York." I came back the next morning. She was very happy. She was showing me her room, her playroom, and was very much in good spirits.
After you completed the placement in March, did you have any concerns for the care that she was receiving from Mr. Roscoe?
No, sir.
Okay. And did you have any concerns regarding Mr. Roscoe's housing and employment?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you believe that Mr. Roscoe was able to meet Scarlett's needs after placement?
Yes.
Okay, and do you believe that Mr. Roscoe will be able to continue to meet those needs?
Yes, I do.
Okay, can you just explain for us why you think he'll be able to continue to complete those needs?
He's made sure that she was he got her set up on insurance immediately. He did go ahead and ensure that she's receiving therapy. He did work with Chosen for a period of time to help with the transition. He has continuously showed to be able to make the progress, speaking with his therapist, Dr. Rachel Yates, also involved in trying to do family therapy with Dr. Rachel Yates at that time. And he's just been very dedicated, and it seemed that has just grown. And I've been able to see just from my conversations at that time with Scarlett how their relationship has grown. And even on the trying days, Daniel has still maintained his composure and just kept going with Scarlett.
Judge, just for clarification, I don't know how long you would like to go before lunch. I mean, it is 11:56. I'm at a good spot to take a pause for lunch if you think that that's appropriate.
My understanding is that we're going to be going through the afternoon. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think it would be a good idea to give everybody a break before we do another 4-hour block or so. How long do you all need? 30 minutes? Is that enough? Do you need longer?
A little longer than a few minutes later.
If we get everybody back into the courtroom, please. All right, Mr. McKeska, Ms. Esslinger, are you ready?
I am, Judge.
Okay, Mr. McKeska, if you want to continue.
Yes, Judge. Judge, just briefly before we continue, I was speaking with Ms. Schoaf during the break, and the HR office for Belong set up 2 interviews for her to conduct for some of her open positions in her unit. I believe the first one's at 1:30, and then the second one is at 2:30. Ms. Schoaf believes that she probably needs 30 minutes for each of those interviews. I don't want to waste time this afternoon, and so I would like to continue with Ms. Schoaf up until about 1:15 or so, and then just ask permission to take witnesses out of order so we can at least continue on.
Is there any objection to that?
No objections.
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
No objection.
All right, then that'll be fine when the time comes.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
Okay, Ms. Schoaf, we left off and wanted to go into the family plan for Mr. Miles Bentz. What services was included on Mr. Bentz's family plan of service?
Random drug testing, psychological evaluation, following recommendations, individual counseling, domestic violence classes, anger management, parenting classes, attend all his parent-child visits, obtain and maintain safe, stable housing, and obtain and maintain stable employment.
Okay. Did you request Mr. Bentz to complete random drug tests during the course of this case?
Yes, sir.
And did you have any concerns for ongoing substance abuse throughout the course of the case?
No, sir. While they were positive, he did provide prescriptions prior to testing.
Okay. Did Mr. Bentz complete his psychological evaluation?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And who did he complete a psychological evaluation with?
With Dr. Russell Thompson's office on November 16th of 23.
You said November 16th of 23?
Yes, sir.
And did Dr. Thompson make any sort of recommendations for additional services for Mr. Bentz?
Continue meeting with his therapist, anger management training, and continue meeting with psychiatrists and taking prescribed medication as prescribed.
Okay. And are you aware of whether or not Mr. Bentz engaged in any sort of medication management with a provider?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Did you have any concerns that Mr. Bentz wasn't following or taking his prescribed medications?
No, sir.
With regard to individual counseling, who did you refer him to?
He was actually already engaged with David Arabi.
And how do you spell that last name? Do you know?
Arabre.
And were you able to confirm with Mr. Arabe Mr. Bentz's compliance with individual counseling?
Yes, he maintained compliance throughout my portion of the case.
And were you able to determine whether or not Mr. Bentz continued to see him or needed to continue to see him?
He was continuing to see him throughout my portion, stating he was actively engaged in accepting feedback, and said he was very motivated to address all behaviors.
Okay. With regard to the domestic violence program, did Mr. Bentz complete domestic violence program?
He was completing domestic violence with Family Violence Prevention Services. As of June 7th, he had attended 19 sessions with 0 absences.
So you said 19 with 0 absences?
Yes, sir.
And do you know how many weeks that program is?
24.
Okay. Did you refer Mr. Bentz to to an anger management program?
He actually had already started that before his family plan and was engaging with Dr. DeFranco.
And do you know how to spell Dr. DeFranco's name?
DeFranco.
Okay. And were you able to receive any sort of feedback from Dr. DeFranco, sorry.
Yes, sir. He reported that Miles maintained consistency in treatment and has demonstrated commitment towards his mental health and ability to navigate his responsibilities across environments, and was complying with ongoing treatment recommendations.
Okay, while you were the primary caseworker, did Mr. Bentz complete that program?
No, sir. It was still ongoing.
Okay. Did you refer Mr. Bentz to a parenting program?
Yes, sir.
And was Mr. Bentz able to complete that program?
Yes, sir. He completed it on January 24th of 2024.
Okay. What was Mr. Bentz's visitation schedule during the course of the case while you had it?
It did start originally 1 hour a week. It did increase on March 23rd to 2 hours a week. And then right at towards the end, I don't remember the specific date. I believe I want to say he had increased to 3 hours.
And were those still supervised whenever you had the case?
Yes, sir. They were supervised. I'm sorry. He had 2 hours supervised by Children Matter and 1 hour unsupervised.
Okay. And when did that start?
It was after the last court hearing, so it would have been in May.
Okay. And even though it was a short time for unsupervised visitation in May, did you have any concerns for Paisley during those unsupervised visits?
No, sir.
Okay. And then were you able to verify housing and employment for Mr. Bentz?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay. So did you have any concerns for any of those?
No, sir.
Okay. When you were the primary caseworker, what was the permanency goal for the children?
It was family reunification.
Okay, and when there's a stated goal of family reunification, what does that generally look like?
That means the goal is to work to get the child back to one of their biological parents.
Okay, and so is it fair to say that in May of 2024, you were looking at the return of the children in family reunification with their fathers?
Yes, sir.
What were you looking at with regard to Mrs. Benz?
At that time, we were requesting mediation to determine what her future access would be.
Well, let's go back to Mrs. Benz for a second. When you were working with her and going through the services, were you able to gauge any sort of specific changes in Mrs. Benz's behavior as she completed services?
No, sir. She was still highly emotional and reactive throughout my portion.
And whenever you refer parents to specific services, what is the department's expectation?
That they will engage in the service, learn from the feedback from their providers, and show a change in those behaviors that resulted in the removal of their child.
And just for clarity purposes, then your testimony is that you didn't see any sort of changes in Mrs. Benz's behaviors whenever you handed the case off.
That is correct.
Okay. With regard to Mr. Roscoe, were you able to see changes in his behaviors?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And can you describe what those sorts of changes were?
He showed himself to be a very nurturing parent, wanting to learn as much as possible of how to help Scarlett and be able to meet her needs.
And then what about regard to Mr. Benz?
Yes, sir. He showed to be able to maintain composure, be actively engaged in all of his services, and even during stressful situations, maintain his composure.
Okay. Pass the witness, Judge.
Mr. Wong?
Ms. Shove, you mentioned that Grace had some issues with scheduling her family violence classes, correct?
Yes, sir.
And was there a wait list for the services at some point?
She did have to get waitlisted, yes, sir. When it came to missing her appointment in March, she did have to be waitlisted.
Okay. And since she's been with the BIF classes, I know you mentioned that you only had the updated information through June. Have you been able to review the records for how many classes she's completed as of today?
No, sir.
How many classes are required to fully complete the BIF program?
24.
And would it surprise you if Grace has 8 remaining at this point?
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled. Just reword it a little bit, Mr. Wong.
Would it be possible for Grace to have been attending classes and only have approximately 8 classes remaining out of the 25?
Objection calls for speculation.
I don't think he's asking her to speculate in the sense that the information might not be available to her. So I want to know if she's made progress. So Mr. Wong, ask it in a way to where I can find out whether or not she's making progress with this course.
And so since June, has Grace been attending the course?
I do not have access to that information.
Who would have access to that information?
The current caseworker, Kimberly Hernandez.
And is Kimberly going to be testifying today?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay. And so she can update the court then on the current status.
That is correct.
And then as far as the behavioral changes, which specific providers should have Grace had some behavioral changes after meeting with them?
After meeting with Ms. Shonda Esparza and with her family violence prevention services.
Okay. And so you mentioned the family violence prevention services, you would have expected her to have changes in behavior, correct? Where she would be able to, I guess, display responsibility for abusive behavior.
That is correct.
That she'd also be able to participate meaningfully in the groups.
Yes, sir.
That she'd be respectful of others.
That is correct.
And I assume you'd also expect that she would be resistant to strategies designed to prevent reoccurrence of the abusive behaviors?
Yes, sir.
So, Judge, may I share my screen?
You may.
You know, the object to him sharing, unless we know what it is and it's been previously admitted.
Yeah, we need to.
And
prove
Your
it up
Honor,
first.
Ms. Schoaf already testified that she has not had access to anything after she became a supervisor in this case. So she's not doesn't have the ability to testify to documents that were produced after she left.
Well, let's do this. Mr. Wong, ask her some questions, lay the predicate and the foundation, and then we'll decide whether or not she is a sponsoring witness and whether or not we can show it.
Of course, Your Honor. And so you're familiar with the CPS case file and the family violence intervention program case notes?
While I had the case, yes, sir.
Right. And again, while you've had the case, that these notes are created on a routine basis as part of the CPS file, correct, for Ms. Bentz?
Yes.
You know, I'm going to object to this line of questioning. I think is referring to notes created by an outside domestic violence source, unless I'm misunderstanding what he's referring to. But the department doesn't create notes for classes outside of the department.
Well, I want to give him the opportunity to ask her a few more questions so I can figure out what he's shooting for before I rule on anything.
And these...
Your Honor, also, I guess we also need to know if he's trying to offer anything into evidence, he has not provided any exhibits to the parties. And as you know, those needed to be provided prior to the trial.
Well, let's let him get there first. He hasn't offered anything, but I don't even know what he's trying to offer yet because he hasn't been able to lay a foundation. So let's get through that, and then when he offers it, then we can hear the objections. Go ahead.
And again, so you're familiar with the the violence intervention program and the records that are kept, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the statements that I made regarding displaying responsibility for abusive behavior, showing respect for others, those are questions that are reported back to CPS, correct?
Yes, sir.
And on Ms. Bentz's file from Violence Intervention Program, it lists that they would agree that she displays responsibility for abusive behavior, including...
I'm going to object to him reading from a document that's not in evidence from a third party.
Sustained. We need to get the foundation laid, and you need to offer it before we start pulling information off of it.
And again, so these documents and these notes are routinely kept by and referred from to CPS, correct?
Again, Your Honor, she's already stated that she does not have access to any of the documents after she left. And if Mr. Wong is referring to some notes, recent notes, then she wouldn't have access to those. So there's no foundation to lay because she shouldn't have access to those. She left in June. And there's another caseworker on the case now. And so I don't know where he's going with this.
Well, the question to ask would be whether or not the document that he's referring to came in before or after Ms. Schoaf was the permanency specialist and then left to be a supervisor. So Ms. Schoaf, Mr. Wong, ask her when this document would have come in.
Well, so Judge, Ms. Schoaf, this document came in on July 7th of 2024. However, your email, is it correct to be kschoaf@sjrctexas.org?
Yes, sir.
And so the document that I'm referring to would have gone to you, correct?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. He's asking about a document created by a third party. She cannot in any way authenticate a document she didn't create. It wasn't even created by the department, as is evidenced by his question.
Well, we're taking a while to get there. Mr. Wong, is this document in fact something that Ms. Schoaf might have created or was part of the file when she was the permanency specialist? Or are you asking her about a document that somebody else created?
No, I'm asking, correct, Your Honor. It's a document that she received, though, from the Violence Intervention Program. She's the one,
Right.
She's the individual who received it. It's not a part of the file.
Did she receive this after she left her role as the permanency specialist?
I just know, Your Honor, that the date of this document is July 8th, which would be after. But that's the only email that would have received this
Just
document.
because she received the email doesn't mean it's not still hearsay. So if that's what you're looking to get in, I don't know how we're going to get there with this witness. If you're wanting to get around hearsay by saying it's a part of the file, then you have to talk to the custodian of the records, which is not her.
Correct. And again, Your Honor, I'm just trying to refer to the document in general and what was expected for Ms. Bentz to show changes on. And again, I can keep going with the other question, Your Honor.
It is hearsay, Your Honor, and he hasn't expressed that it's in general. He's being very specific to what he's reading on the document. And Ms. Schoaf, as we've said numerous times, left that position in June. And so, like you said, Your Honor, even though the email may have went to her, it was not her case any longer.
Now, I'm in agreement with Ms. Pearsall and Mr. Fuller at this point, Mr. Wong. I don't think Ms. Schoaf is the sponsoring witness for this document that you're referring to.
I understand, Your Honor. Again, I'm not asking for it to be admitted right now. Then all I'm asking then is, Ms. Schoaf, would the behaviors that you would expect Grace to show changes of be taking responsibility for abusive behavior?
Objection. Even I don't know what he's asking. Argumentative?
It sounds to me like you're asking what type of behaviors you would expect her to see in response to whatever class she was taking. Is that what you're asking?
That's correct, Your Honor. And again, I'm just simply asking if Ms. Schoaf would expect Grace to show these, and it's a yes or no. And I think she's already said it was yes, that these were.
Your Honor, she already was asked and answered whether Ms. Bentz made any changes during the case when Ms. Schoaf was the caseworker. She said she did not see changes. So now to backdoor it by reading some document that Ms. Schoaf was not a part of, I object to that, Your Honor.
Well, I agree that Mr. McKeska went over that with her, but Mr. Wong has not explored it with her yet. He can still ask those questions, but I don't think you can get there by alluding to some document that hasn't been admitted into evidence yet. So just to put this to bed, I'm going to sustain any objections to any hearsay that might be elicited through this document without it being admitted. And I think we need to move on because I'm not really sure where we're going at this point.
And so the other providers that you referred Grace to, you said the psychologist. What changes were you expecting her to make from the psychologist?
The psychologist was just an evaluation that also recommends the individual therapy.
And from Grace's individual therapy, was she not going to the individual therapy?
She was still attending her individual therapy.
And so what actual changes would you have expected from individual therapy?
For her to be able to compose herself appropriately in difficult situations, to be able to address any of her mental health conditions with her therapist, to be able to discuss appropriate interventions when it comes to parenting, to be able to parent appropriately and in a calm manner, and to be able to be more resilient to negative feedback.
And
I'm sorry, what was that last that you said, Ms. Show?
Be more resilient when it comes to receiving information that you do not want to hear.
and so in what settings would you, can you give the court examples of when Ms. Bentz did not act accordingly?
So her last parent-child visit that I supervised, Grace became hysterical and emotional, refused to listen when I tried to end the visit with her, was upsetting her daughter and told her her daughter was making her look bad in court, and was getting very frustrated with her daughter to the point her daughter was in tears and thought her daughter told me my mother hates me.
And when specifically was this?
I will pull it up. It was in May. I will have to look up the date. I have it as May 9th.
And then after May 9th, are you aware if Grace attended any other sessions with her therapist?
She was still attending therapy, yes.
Okay. And what was the frequency of her therapy visits?
At that time was, to my knowledge, was once a week.
Okay. And so after that occurred, did she have any further interactions or meetings with her daughter, Scarlett?
No, sir.
And so are you able to confirm that she has not been able to make any changes since that May incident?
Objection, no personal knowledge.
Sustained.
So how is Grace supposed to make changes if she hasn't seen the child since May?
Objection, no personal knowledge.
Well, I think this question changed to more something opinion based. And she was the caseworker May through June. So I think she can give her opinion based on that time period. So overruled.
So she can show her those during her other visits with Paisley and during her interactions in regards to her regular life and the interactions with the caseworker.
Okay. And how were her interactions with Paisley?
During my portion, her visits were going well with Paisley.
So did you have any concerns with her being appropriate around Paisley?
No, sir.
And so after May, was she appropriate with Paisley?
Objection, no personal knowledge.
I think I already ruled on that. She has knowledge of how the visits went between May and June. Overruled.
During my course, there were no concerns towards that portion.
While you were the caseworker, was it still part of the plan that Grace would have access to Paisley?
And that's what we were working on scheduling mediation for. But yes, we were
Okay.
still having visits at the time.
Sorry, what was that?
But yes,
sorry,
we were
cut you
still
off.
having parent-child visits at the time.
And was the plan for Grace to have unsupervised visits of Paisley?
Not at that time, no, sir.
What was preventing her from having unsupervised visits at that time?
At that time, we were wanting to see she had only just begun her family violence prevention services, wanted to see her engage before we could start increasing. The next step would have been 2-hour visits.
And how many more visits with the family violence would she have had to conduct or complete, classes?
It
Your
was
Honor, that calls for speculation on her part. It depends on how she engages in the classes, not the number of classes. It's not about checking off the boxes. It's about learning.
Sustained.
What did you relay to Grace about the expectation for when she would go from 1 hour visits to 2 hour visits?
that we would wait for the results back from her family violence prevention service provider upon the following month, and then we will staff with our supervisor to discuss of increase to 2 hours a week.
And did that meeting occur?
I provided that information during the case transfer. I do not know what happened after that portion.
Okay, so your plan was to have a subsequent meeting the following month to possibly transition to longer visits.
That is correct.
Are you aware if that occurred?
I do not know, sir. I was after I had left the case.
And how was Grace in her interactions with you as a caseworker?
Grace was very emotional during most of my visits with her. My meeting with her in March, she became very distraught while we were discussing. My most successful meeting with her, where she maintained her composure and was really the only incident, was the one time in May when we met at your office.
And so is it not uncommon for a parent to be emotional when CPS is involved in the case?
I have had parents be emotional, but not to this level.
And did Grace show any other changes that you were able to observe after the May meeting with Scarlett?
No, sir.
Okay. And I know you mentioned counseling and the domestic violence classes. What other providers were you trying to see change from Grace?
It would have been also at that time she had started her anger management with her same therapist with Shonda.
And were you ever able to speak with her therapist, Chandra?
I spoke with her when we went to get the session started, which was at the end of April. And I spoke with her again right after the incident with Scarlett. I did not speak with her after that portion.
And with the anger management, was Grace receptive to the anger management with Chandra?
I had not received the notes as that time because it had not been a month as of yet.
Okay. And prior to that, was she was attending those sessions regularly with her?
To my knowledge, yes, sir.
And you mentioned that there were there drug concerns with Ms. Pence?
No, sir.
Okay. And then you also mentioned that she would have to do a medication management.
That is correct.
Are you aware if her medication was ever changed during the course of this CPS case?
She did not provide me with her prescriptions. She did provide me that she did seek, I believe that with Dr. Redding, if I'm recalling that exactly correct, who she was seeing for her medication management.
And do you have any reason to believe that she has not been using her medication regularly or as prescribed?
I do not know, as I don't have a copy of her prescriptions on that one.
Did you have any concerns that Grace was abusing the prescriptions?
No, sir.
And you mentioned that there was a family violence between Grace and Miles, correct?
There was, yes.
And it was from both sides of physical domestic violence?
That is correct.
What domestic violence was attributable from Miles to Grace? What occurred?
I'm going to object as to no personal knowledge.
Sustain, rephrase.
So did Miles Spence admit to assaulting Grace Spence?
I object as to no personal knowledge unless he admitted it to Ms. Shaw.
Well, let's find out if she knows or not. Overruled. Either Ms. Shaw, you either know or you don't know.
He never disclosed anything directly to me, no, sir.
Did Grace disclose any domestic violence to you?
Yes, sir.
What did she disclose?
Your Honor, and I'm going to object to that unless it's a statement against herself. It's hearsay.
Well, it's a statement by a party opponent.
Right, but if it's a statement against another party, that's a self-serving statement. That doesn't qualify under that exception. If she admitted to the domestic violence she committed, then that qualifies.
It's part of the reports, Your Honor. The statements that both parties have made are compiled in Ms. Shaw's reports.
You're asking her a question that's based on information that's already in the report?
It's correct, Your Honor. These are in the reports.
Oh, it's in the report. We've all seen it.
Well, what report is he referring to, Your Honor?
Which report are you referring to?
So it's the initial report for the September 15th incident.
Are you talking about the affidavit?
I don't think I think it's part of that. That's included, correct?
You know, then that's the wrong witness.
The affidavit is based on the this is sworn allegations of the investigator. Ms. Shope did work on this case, but she was not the investigator.
I can move on, Your Honor.
Okay.
And so, Ms. Shope, the concerns with Miles Spence, what were they?
There was concerns that he had engaged in domestic violence with Grace Spence.
And were you provided with any documentation to support the domestic violence claims?
Investigations was provided with documentation.
Okay, and were you able to review any of the documentation as the supervisor?
As the caseworker, yes, sir.
Okay, and the documentation you reviewed, what did it contain?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained. I'm not sure where we're going with this one.
So, Ms. Shope, you reviewed documentation. What documentation did you review that gave you the impression that there was domestic violence committed by Miles Spence?
Objection, hearsay, and speculation.
Rephrase.
Why are you of the opinion that Miles Spence committed acts of domestic violence against Grace Spence?
Objection, Your Honor. She already testified she has no personal knowledge of that. And you already ruled on that as well.
It's different, Your Honor. This is based on what she's seen, and it's her opinion of, and in her mind of what has occurred based on what she has reviewed in the case.
She has testified she has seen nothing. He's trying to get in inadmissible hearsay. If he wants to bring in some documents, he's an attorney. He knows how to share documents he chose not to share before this trial.
He asked her about her opinion, and we have a verifiable period of time where she was the caseworker and she worked with these parties. So if you're asking her about her opinion based on her experience working with Mr. Bentz, then I don't think that is objectionable at this point for her to offer her opinion on that. And he's asking her why. So overruled.
It was based off of information from the removal affidavit for the reason for removal.
And what was that?
Your Honor, that's been asked and answered from the very beginning.
He hasn't asked it. She hasn't answered it from him. Asked and answered it doesn't apply globally. It's party to party. I'll let him have a little latitude on it, but not much, Mr. Wong. We need to move on. Overrule.
During that incident for the last removal in the vehicle, it was stated that Grace Spence had tried to grab the steering wheel to swerve the vehicle into an 18-wheeler, in which Miles Spence then did punch Grace Spence in the face to prevent some.
Were there other incidents that you investigated regarding Miles Spence assaulting Grace Spence?
Your Honor, I'd object. Ms. Schoaf is not an investigator. She didn't investigate any incidents. She's the legal worker in this case. What was the legal worker?
Saying, rephrase.
Are you aware of any other incidents of physical domestic violence against Grace Spence committed by Miles Spence?
What did you say?
I didn't hear that.
I would object to hearsay and lack of personal knowledge.
Ask your question again, because it garbled up on me.
Are you aware of any other domestic violence incidents between Miles Spence against Grace Spence, committed by Miles Spence against Grace Spence?
Overruled. He's asking her if she's aware of it, not whether it happened or what the details were. She's either aware or she's not. Overruled.
Not through direct knowledge.
What knowledge do you have?
From information that Grace Spence has reported.
Okay. And have you reviewed information from Miles Spence where he has stated that he would lie and make false reports?
Your Honor, I'd object to facts not into evidence.
Well, I think he's trying to get him there. He's asking her if she's aware of it. I don't think he's trying to make a connection to anything that's not in evidence right now. He's just asking her a question. Overruled.
You know, but he can ask a question by allegedly misquoting what somebody else said.
Well, I don't even think we're to that point yet, but rephrase, Mr. Wong. I mean, here's the thing. We're going to be here so much longer than we have to be if everything that comes out of Mr. Wong's mouth is objectionable. So, Mr. Wong, you need to watch the questions you're asking. And before y'all object to it, you need to make sure that you have a legal objection to something that he's asking and not something that he might ask. Otherwise, we're going to be here all day. Go ahead, Mr. Wong.
Are you aware of Miles Spence telling CPS that he would make lies against Grace Spence?
No, sir.
When Scarlett was moved to New York, how many different counselors or therapists did she work with?
She had a therapist in Houston who helped with the transition to going to New York. And then she worked with family therapy with Dr. Yates, plus the therapist that was in New York that they were getting set up.
And was Grace involved with meeting any of those therapists?
No, sir.
Was Grace ever set up to have any sessions with the therapist?
No, sir.
Is there a reason why she would not be able to communicate with the therapist?
At that time, we were trying to get Scarlett leveled in addressing the behaviors, the trauma she had experienced. Also, which was the time in Houston and then with Dr. Yates. The goal was eventually, once Scarlett settled down, we were going to work with trying to get towards doing visits through family therapy for Miss Bentz. When I was transferring over the case, Scarlett was just starting her initial intake with the in-person therapist in New York.
So the plan was for Grace and Scarlett to still have communication and work on therapy amongst themselves.
To have visits through therapy if recommended by the therapist.
And when you were on the case, did that ever change to where Grace was going to be cut out completely?
No, so that was the last thing we had stated.
And are you aware of any events that occurred after that date that would create a situation where Grace now would have no access?
No, sir.
And with Paisley, was there a situation where you believed that Grace would not be a part of Paisley's life once this case concluded?
That would have determined the totality of the entire case.
While you were involved in the case, was that your opinion that Grace would not have access to Paisley?
It was still unsure at the point that we were working towards mediation to determine that.
And hypothetically, if Grace completed the classes that she needed to finish, would she have access to Paisley?
It would have been
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I'd object to that. Calls for speculation on her part. I know it's a hypothetical, but she hasn't been on the case since June.
I would agree, sustained.
And Judge, it is 1:25, and I know the chef has that interview at 1:30. So if we could hit the pause button on her testimony.
We can. There were no objections, so I will excuse Ms. Schoaf. We'll recess her testimony at this time. Who do you want to call next?
Judge, I'll call Ms. Hernandez.
All right, Ms. Schoaf, whenever you're done, come on back and get in the waiting room, and I'll let everybody know, okay?
Thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you. And remember, don't discuss the case with anybody else while you're gone. All right. Ms. Hernandez.
Can I ask if we take like a 60-second recess?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Essley, are you ready?
I am.
Thank you. Mr. McKesky, you called Ms. Hernandez, correct?
That's correct, Judge.
All right, I'm going to go back on the record. Cause number 23-09-28697-TV. In the interest of Scarlett Powell et al. Mr. McKesky, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Hernandez, can you please state your name?
Yes, Kimberly Hernandez.
And how are you currently employed?
I'm a permanency specialist with Belong.
Okay, and are you the current permanency specialist for this case?
Yes.
And when did you become the primary caseworker?
Mid-June of this year.
Okay. And as part of your duties as the current permanency specialist, have you reviewed the case file and the things that happened prior to you becoming the current permanency specialist?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And have you taken up the responsibility of ensuring the parent's compliance with their family plans of service?
Yes.
Okay. So let's start with Mrs. Bentz. And whenever you took up the case based off of my notes, she was engaged in individual counseling with Ms. Shonda Esparza. Is that correct?
Yes.
And have you had the opportunity to follow up and gauge Ms. Bentz's compliance with individual counseling?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and what sort of progress has Ms. Bentz made for or with her individual counseling?
Yes, her therapist states that she's met with her biweekly since June, and that she is continuing to do an anger management through her sessions, and has been progressing at meeting those goals that they've established in sessions.
Okay. Have there been any major concerns with Ms. Bentz not attending individual counseling?
No, not since I've been on the case.
Okay. Have you been able to discuss the treatment goals and those sorts of things with Mrs. Bentz?
Not with Miss Bentz, no. I've spoken with the therapist.
Okay. What is your understanding of what those treatment goals are?
Yes, I can I pull them up? I'm sorry.
Well, just what's your understanding of them?
Okay, so working through her triggers, and what would trigger her, that's what the main thing is through their anger management. She has been, her therapist did state that she has been, her mental health seems to be better since the onstart.
Okay. Has Ms. Esparza successfully dismissed Ms. Bentz from individual counseling?
No, she hasn't.
And what is your understanding of what Ms. Bentz needs to continue to address, or what's been unaddressed in her individual counseling?
For my conversation with a therapist, they are still working through her anger management goals. The last notes I received was that they were going to be out for the next 90 days.
Can you explain that for me?
That she would still be receiving services with Ms. Esparza for the next 90 days.
Okay, so there's a recommendation for continued therapy for the next 3 months.
Yes.
And was there any specific issues that need to be addressed in those sessions that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. I know Ms. Esparza did state that one of her big concerns is that Ms. Bentz tends to get into relationships quickly with men, and that it was disclosed during a session that she is currently pregnant and residing with someone.
Have you been able to address that with Ms. Bentz?
Not in depth, no, sir.
With regard to her domestic violence program, where is she? So that is a terrible question. With regard to domestic violence, what is your understanding of how many classes she's completed?
The last report I received was the July progress report, and she had completed 11 classes and still needed 13.
Have you received any reports for the month of August?
No, I haven't.
During the period that you've had the case, has Ms. Bentz missed classes?
No, she hasn't.
Have you been able to discuss what Ms. Bentz is learning through domestic violence with her?
No, I haven't.
And is Ms. Bentz only required to complete the domestic violence program for perpetrators in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other services, ongoing services for Ms. Bentz at this time?
Aside from therapy and domestic violence?
Yes. Okay. Have you had an opportunity to visit Ms. Bentz's home?
Yes, I have.
Were there any concerns with the home environment?
No, there weren't.
Okay, with regard to visitation, what is Ms. Bentz's current visitation schedule?
Currently, she has 1 hour supervised visits with Paisley weekly, and visitation with Scarlett has not occurred.
Okay. Why does Ms. Bentz still only have 1 hour of supervised visitation per week with Paisley, given the current stage of the case?
When the case transferred to me in June, it was discussed that if she were to be progressing to 2 hours supervised visitation, that we would need to see progress in her domestic violence classes. The report that we had received in May showed that she was showing resistance to the group sessions that she was having. And so that did not occur at that time.
Okay. And have there been any additional discussions since that time frame to increase visitation?
No, there hasn't.
You said visits with Scarlett were suspended.
Yes.
With regard to Mr. Roscoe, are there any ongoing services for him at this time?
Just continued therapy with Dr. Rachel Yates.
And how is he doing in that therapy?
He's doing well. Dr. Yates hasn't reported any concerns.
Okay, and is that just individual therapy, or is it also family therapy with Scarlett?
It had also been family therapy with Scarlett. Dr. Yates wanted her to be established with a therapist in person in New York because she wasn't doing very well with the Zoom sessions.
Okay. And has that therapy for Scarlett been set up?
Yes, it has.
And have you had an opportunity to get any sort of progress reports on that family therapy?
It's individual therapy that she's receiving in New York, but no,
Okay.
I haven't received progress notes yet from that therapist.
Okay. Have you had a chance to evaluate how Scarlett's doing in Mr. Roscoe's home?
Yes, I have.
And what is your assessment of how she's doing?
She's doing well there. She is comfortable. She seems very bonded with Mr. Roscoe.
Have you had a chance to visit the home?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Did you have any concerns for the home?
No, I didn't.
And how long ago did you have that in-home visit?
I visited in June and July, and prior to me taking over the case as the primary worker, I also visited in April and May as well.
Is Mr. Roscoe currently meeting all of Scarlett's needs?
Yes, he is.
Do you have any concerns for his ability to meet her needs in the future?
No, I don't.
Okay. Does Mr. Roscoe have any other services that are ongoing at this time?
No, not at this time.
And then with regard to Mr. Bentz, does he have any ongoing services?
Yes, he is continuing to engage in his individual therapy and anger management, as well as medication management with his psychiatrist.
Okay. How is he doing in individual therapy?
He's doing very well. I've received progress notes for this month and last month from the therapist saying that he is committed to sessions and maintaining composure and handling life stressors.
Okay. Have there been any recommendations, or were there any recommendations from his therapist?
No, there weren't.
has the therapist made any sort of recommendations of how long Mr. Bench should continue to engage in therapy?
The last note that I had said that there were sessions scheduled until the end of August. I'm not sure if there have been any more for September scheduled.
Okay. With regard to the anger management program, how is Mr. Bentz doing in that program?
He's doing very well.
Have you been able to get any updates regarding recommendations from that program?
I spoke with the therapist that's doing anger management, Dr. DeFranco. He stated that Miles is continuing to do very well in that therapy, and he doesn't have any concerns currently for him.
Okay. Is there a specified number of sessions for anger management, or is it just an ongoing service?
My understanding it's ongoing.
Okay. And then how's Mr. Bentz doing with regard to his medication management?
He's doing well. He has sent me his prescriptions from when he met with the the psychiatrist this past month.
Okay. Do you have any concerns that he's not complying with that service?
No, I don't.
Okay. As part of your responsibilities, do you meet with the parents often to discuss the current state of the case?
Yes.
Okay. When's the last time you met with Mrs. Bentz?
I met with her last month. I'm sorry, last week.
Okay. And have you been able to gauge whether or not mom is making behavioral changes based off of what she's learning in her classes?
That has been my only meeting with Miss Bentz. But based on that visit and conversation with her therapist, she is progressing.
Okay. Since you've had the case since June of 2024, why is it that you only met with mom once, and that was last week?
I attempted to visit with Miss Bentz in July with her attorney. That visit was canceled whenever I was on my way, I believe, due to a medical emergency.
Okay. So you personally haven't been able to really draw any conclusions regarding changes in behavior for Mrs. Bentz in this case, then?
Correct.
Okay. What about with Mr. Roscoe? Have you been able to make determinations with regard to him?
I have met with Mr. Roscoe multiple times, I believe for the past 4 months, and I don't have any concerns with Scarlett being placed with him or his progress in his services.
Okay. And then finally, for Mr. Bentz, have you been able to ascertain whether or not he's made any behavioral changes as a result of his services?
Yes, each progress note that I've received from his therapies have stated that he's made behavioral changes.
Okay. What about your personal observations?
Each time I've met with Mr. Bentz, he's been composed and respectful to me. Based from the beginning of the case till now, I wouldn't be able to gauge that.
Okay. Pass witness, Judge.
Mr. Wong.
Ms. Fernandez, you stated that the reason Paisley hasn't had increased or Grace hasn't had increased visit time with Paisley is because she wasn't participating in the group sessions with domestic violence. Is that correct?
There was a progress note from the domestic violence classes that stated she was showing resistance to the group therapy.
And showing resistance in what way?
I'm not sure as to the links of that. That is what was in the progress note.
And these progress notes, these are notes that, sorry, you can finish your response. I apologize.
Oh, I was just saying at the time of transfer.
Okay. And then the progress note, you said that was in the May report that you received?
Correct.
And do you receive reports on a monthly basis, like May, June, July, etc.?
Yes.
And you've had a chance to review all of those reports?
Yes, I have.
And so in those reports, it states that she's not
Objection to hearsay.
Sustained. Let's get there another way.
And when you are reviewing the progress reports, do you agree, or does Grace's behavior in groups, has it improved or not improved?
Objection to personal knowledge.
Mr. Wong, let's lay the predicate for what she knows about the reports in the file.
The family violence reports, how do you receive those?
They're emailed to me once a month.
And is this, are these reports something that you review and you receive on a regular basis?
Monthly, yes.
And these reports, they comprise how you make your determination on what to do on the CPS case?
Yes, they're a part of it.
And as being a part of it, you review what they say, correct?
Yes.
And you've reviewed these reports and notes?
Yes, I have.
And you've only been reviewing them since May, correct?
Correct.
And again, that these reports are something that are regularly made by a domestic violence program and submitted to you for review so you can make recommendations.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
You use these reports when you determine what to recommend.
Yes, they are part of it.
And for participation in the groups, what are the 5 categories that are graded?
I'm not sure. I would have to pull up a progress note.
Can I refresh the witness's recollection, Judge? I can pull up a progress report.
No, there's no way to do that on Zoom. It's a hearsay court statement.
She can send it. She can review it herself if she has the notes in front of her, or I can email them to her.
If she's trying to refresh her recollection and it's the same report that everybody's entitled to as part of the file, he's laid a foundation. Is that the report you're going to use, Ms. Hernandez?
Judge, I don't think it is. Our discovery was provided to us on May 23rd. He's referring to something that occurred since then that wouldn't have come to anybody but mom's attorney. So the rest of us, well, at least I for sure hasn't seen it. I don't know about the child's attorney. I can't speak for her.
If you want to ask about it, Mr. Wong, for recollection to be refreshed and use a document, it's got to be a document everybody else can see. Do you want to send it to everybody else to use it?
I can send it to everybody else, Judge, or I can just share my screen and everyone can look at it. Whether we send it through email, I can just share it right now. They can all see it.
Well, Judge, if you send it through email, everybody gets an opportunity to review it and decide if they want to object to it. So why don't you send it to everybody, let everybody see it, and we'll come back at 2 o'clock. It's 1:53. That's 7 minutes.
Can I get everyone's email just so I can make one group?
Put it in the chat. Put your email in the chat, please. We'll be in recess.
A few minutes later.
If we can get everybody back in the courtroom, please.
Your Honor, we were just sent a second report and I haven't had an opportunity to even look at it. It just came across.
Okay. We'll take a few more minutes. Everybody take a look. It's 2:04. I think. Will 2:10 give you enough time to review it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor, that's plenty.
All right. See you at 2:10.
A few minutes later, a little longer than a few minutes later.
We're going to go back on the record. Clause number 23-09-28697-CV in the interest of Powell. And Mr. Wong, you were questioning Ms. Hernandez about a report. Everybody has had the opportunity to review either one or two reports, I believe. And you were asking to refresh her recollection with the writing been provided to the other parties. So please proceed.
May I share, Your Honor, with Ms. Hernandez to refresh her recollection, the report?
No, Your Honor, it's a hearsay statement.
It's a writing used to refresh her recollection. If you put it on the screen, then you're essentially admitting it into evidence.
I can send it to her for review, Your Honor. She has it in front of her. You know, she has her file. This is part of her file.
Well, my understanding is that we just spent 20 minutes so that everybody could review what you wanted her to read.
I sent it, right, but I don't believe Ms. Hernandez sent her email address. It was only the attorneys.
Judge, we've been back at least once since you gave that instruction. I mean, you could have asked.
Well, again, Your Honor, I did not know that she wasn't just going to, she had it in front of her. But again,
if she has the document in front of her that you just sent to everybody else, and that's what you're using to refresh her recollection, there's no reason that I need to put it up on a screen. Correct? It's just like we're in a courtroom where everybody's able to see what she has sitting in front of her, but it's not going to come into evidence.
Correct, Your Honor. I understand that. The issue is Ms. Hernandez. I can ask some other questions, Your Honor. Ms. Hernandez, have you reviewed the June report from the domestic violence?
Yes, I have.
And was there progress made when Grace was participating in the program?
Your Honor, and I'm going to object to hearsay.
Rephrase your question, Mr. Wong. Sustained.
Based on your review of the report from June, was Grace showing signs of resistance to the group meetings?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained. I think what you're going to have to ask her, Mr. Wong, are opinions in her work as the caseworker on this case, not factual things that would elicit hearsay. This document was only provided to her, and we've only reviewed it to refresh her recollection of what she knows.
So in your opinion, Ms. Hernandez, from reviewing the June records from domestic violence, was Grace participating in the in the group sessions?
Objection, hearsay.
Why don't you just ask her if she was participating, if she was the caseworker? Why do we even, and it's a fact, she either knows the fact or she doesn't.
Was she participating, Ms. Hernandez? Was Grace participating in the domestic violence classes in June?
Yes, she was.
And was she still showing signs of resistance in the group sessions?
No, not on that. That's not listed on that progress report.
And so would that was a change from May to June, correct?
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Rephrase, sustained.
Was that different than the May classes?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
In your opinion, was there progress made between May and June?
Your Honor, that calls for speculation on her part. She's not a provider for domestic violence. It calls for speculation.
I think the issue that we have right now, Mr. Wong, is that although Ms. Hernandez is a custodian of these records, I feel as if you're trying to elicit information from her that would be more appropriate from another sponsoring witness. And that's why I think you're running into so many objections here. And I don't know that we're going to get there this way. It's almost as if we've left the realm of what facts and direct knowledge she has and how she can interpret the records based on her job and her role as a custodian. And we're asking her to make inferences and draw conclusions that she's not quite qualified to draw. So I don't know that we're going to get there this way. I think we're just going to run into more objections that I'm going to have to sustain.
Based on your review of the records, how was Grace performing in the domestic violence classes in June?
Objection, hearsay.
No, I'll allow that. That's general enough. Overruled.
The progress report reported that she was engaged in June.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Here we are again. I mean, I just think we're not going to get around this, Mr. Wong.
And then how was Grace in July in the domestic violence classes?
Objection, Your Honor. It's hearsay and no personal knowledge.
You're going to have to ask it a different way, Mr. Wong, or get it somewhere, some other way. It's the same. We're running into the same issue over and over and over again.
So when you had issues with Grace and our participation in the group sessions in May, why were there no further communications with CPS about her performance in June and July?
Objection, compound question.
Sustained.
Were there any other meetings about increasing Grace's visits in June?
No, there weren't.
Sorry, there were or were not?
There were or were not?
I'm sorry. In June, when the case transferred to me, yes, that was when we had that discussion.
And then were there any discussions in July?
No, there were not.
Were there any discussions in August?
No, there weren't.
Why not?
We were waiting on information from the providers and from her individual therapist.
What information were you waiting on?
Her progress notes.
And when were those progress notes received?
We have not received the domestic violence progress note for August, and we received the therapy notes in August.
So is that an issue that would be remedied by Grace or by the providers?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I'm not understanding the question.
Who provides the reports to CPS so y'all can review them? The providers or does Grace?
The providers.
And so it was not because Grace was resistant to giving documentation.
No, I haven't received documentation from Grace.
Was documentation requested from Grace that you're still waiting on?
No.
And so is there any harm in having that meeting about expanding Grace's visitation now that you have those notes?
Objection, Your Honor, we're here for trial. This question is completely irrelevant.
Sustained.
Would those notes have been helpful for you to have them to review prior to today?
Again, Your Honor, I'd object. We're here for trial. We're here for a termination trial. And it's a little late for Mr. Wong to be proposing meetings when the testimony was that he did not allow his client to meet with the caseworker, only if he was present.
Sustained. We've got a relevancy issue here. We need to just focus the issues on whether or not the department is meeting their burden to prove the grounds they're trying to prove, and your defense of that. We can't get into what we might be able to do. This is trial.
And so, Kimberly, you mentioned that Grace was progressing with the services while you were on the case, correct?
Yes.
And was there any indication given to you that she would not continue to progress with the services?
You know, that calls for speculation on her part.
And hearsay statement by somebody else.
Sustained.
In your opinion, was Grace progressing forwards with the case through services?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
Through your review of the counseling notes, was Grace not attending any counseling sessions since you've been on the case?
Asked and answered, Your Honor. We've already gone through how often she went to counseling and BIP, or not BIP, domestic violence.
Sustained. We need to move on to something else, Mr. Wong. I'm very well familiar of where we are as far as the disagreement on her engagement in her services to this point with these particular subjects.
When you visited with Grace at her residence, Ms. Hernandez, was that Grace's residence or was it someone else's?
It was Grace's residence.
And did she live with anyone or she lived alone?
I believe she lived with Mr. Joe Mercado.
Are you aware that Mr. Mercado has a separate residence?
No, I'm not.
Was Mr. Mercado asked by the department to be at that visit?
Yes.
Why was that?
So we could meet him.
And at that point, did Grace confirm that Mr. Mercado lived there?
That was my understanding, yes.
How did you come to that understanding?
I believe she mentioned that when we were there.
And since you've been on the case, how have Grace's visits been with Paisley?
Since I've been on the case, there was about, I believe it's a month of missed visits at the end of June and throughout July. And then 2 of those visits were due. One was due to Paisley being sick, and one was due to being the 4th of July week and the Children's Matter office was closed. I added that hour on to another visit initially, and I received feedback that Paisley was very disassociated after that visit with mom. And we've gone back to those 1-hour visits each week. And I haven't received any word about that since.
And Were there any other issues with the visits with Paisley?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So I know you said she missed a month of visits, but 2 of them were, I guess, not Grace's, related to something Grace brought up.
Correct.
And then Scarlett, what's the current status with Scarlett's therapy?
She is engaged in therapy.
And was there any change with the therapist, including Grace, in sessions?
Not with her current therapist in New York, no.
Is there a reason?
We haven't received that recommendation from that therapist.
And who is that therapist? Is that Dr. Yates?
No, Dr. Yates is here in Texas.
Okay. When did the New York therapist begin?
I believe Scarlett had intake appointments. I want to say at the end of May or in June. I'm not for sure on the exact date.
Do you know how many sessions of therapy Scarlett has had with the New York therapist?
No, I don't.
Are you aware if Scarlett wants to have a relationship with her mother?
I'm not aware.
I'll pass.
Mr. Salvador?
Yes, for the record, how long has Scarlett been with her father?
Since March of this year.
Okay, and you've been able to meet with Scarlett and my client?
Yes, I have.
Okay, any concerns there?
No, there's no concerns.
Okay, do you believe Mr. Roscoe is meeting all of her needs at this time?
Yes, I do.
Is Scarlett receiving any therapy at this time?
Yes, she is.
And to your knowledge, what is she addressing in therapy with her therapist?
I have not received therapy notes from her therapist in New York.
Okay, have you tried to call the therapist to see what they're working through?
Yes, I've called and I've left her voicemails, but I have not received information back from her.
Okay. And are you familiar with some of the issues and concerns that Scarlett has?
Yes.
Okay. And what has she told you about the abuse that she was subjected to by Ms. Benz?
Scarlett has not shared any of that with me.
Okay. To your knowledge, has she shared that with anyone else at the department or belong?
I believe with the previous caseworker.
Okay, and that would be with Ms. Schoaf, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and since taking over this case, has Mr. Roscoe completed all of his services?
Yes, he has. I
Okay,
believe he's still engaged in therapy with Dr. Yates.
Okay. And have you talked to Ms. Yates about Mr. Roscoe's progress?
Yes, I have.
Are there any concerns at this time with therapy?
No, there aren't.
Okay, do you believe it's in Scarlett's best interest to continue placement with her father?
Yes, I do.
And why do you believe that?
Scarlett's in a safe home environment. When I visited, she seems very happy, very bonded with Mr. Roscoe, and she's receiving the services that she needs.
Okay. And as a part of this, taking over this case, do you review the file?
Yes.
Okay. And do you review the prior history of each parent prior to taking over a case?
Yes.
And why do you do that?
To be able to assess protective capabilities and what's happened in the case thus far.
Okay. Does that also help you make recommendations regarding services?
Yes.
Okay. And is that information important to providers when going through therapy or classes recommended by the department?
Yes.
Okay. Did you review Ms. Benz's history?
Yes.
Okay. And from reviewing Ms. Benz's history prior to this case, did she have any involvement with the department?
Yes, she did.
Okay, and what was that involvement?
I know there was I'm sorry, I don't have the dates or the years, but Miss Benz has a child who there was a previous investigation with.
Okay, do you remember why there was an investigation regarding that child?
Yes, there were unexplained, I believe, skull fractures. There was broken bones.
Okay, so while that child was in Miss Benz's care, there was injury to a child. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you remember the outcome of that investigation?
Yes, I believe it was a reason to believe.
Okay, a reason to believe, do you know exactly what the finding was?
I do not know.
Okay, but was it related to physical abuse of that other child?
Yes.
Okay, and to your knowledge, is Miss Benz, does she have any custody, care, or control of that other child?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay, and after that, was there any other CPS involvement?
Not that I'm remembering, aside from this case.
Okay. Prior to this legal removal, do you remember if the parents were engaged in any services, family-based or voluntary services?
Yes. Grace Benz and Miles Benz had a family-based case.
Okay. And do you remember what started that family-based case before this legal case?
I do not know.
Okay. Do you believe that had something to do with also physical violence between Miss Benz and Mr. Benz?
My understanding, yes, is that it's been ongoing domestic violence.
Okay. And after reviewing the file, do you believe that they successfully completed the family-based services?
Yes, that case was closed out.
Okay. Do you remember around what date that was closed out before this legal case?
I believe it was a month before this legal case opened.
Okay. So just to recollect, there was a family-based case where Miss Benz successfully completed it, and the issue and concerns were domestic violence. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then a month later, we had this legal removal. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do you recall why this legal removal was done?
Yes, I do. And
why was that?
Because there was continued domestic violence and concerns regarding mental health. Okay.
So far, the history that we have for Miss Benz is that we had a child with a fractured rib and a skull fracture. Then we had a family-based case prior to this case for domestic violence. And now we have a third involvement with CPS regarding domestic violence. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you recall that her involvement with the department backdates to 2014?
I'm not certain on the date.
Okay.
But yes.
But does that sound familiar to you?
Yes.
Okay. And so we're about almost a year into this case. Has Miss Benz completed her services?
No, she hasn't.
What has she actually completed in the year that this court has given her to complete services to reunify with her children?
She has completed a parenting class.
Okay. Do you believe that just completing a parenting class is sufficient to overcome domestic violence concerns that have been happening since 2014?
No.
And do you believe that creates a continuing danger for the children?
Yes.
And how does that create a continuing danger?
The issues of why we were involved in this case haven't been resolved.
Okay. And you stated that Scarlett herself has made some outcries to the prior worker. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did you ever review the notes of the prior worker?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what the outcries were to Ms. Schoaf?
I believe it was being choked or attempted drowning by Miss Benz.
Okay. So just to be clear, so Scarlett had outcried to Ms. Schoaf that at some point Ms. Benz had choked her physically and tried to physically drown her. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that was a report made to Ms. Schoaf.
Okay. And do you believe that she's addressed those concerns in the services that she's completed?
No, I do not.
Okay. And after this case started, there was reports that Miss Spence continued to engage in domestic violence with Mr. Spence. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, there was reports made to the department, or the department became aware that there was domestic violence ongoing between Miss Spence and Mr. Spence during the pendency of this case. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Is that concerning?
Yes, it is.
And why is that concerning?
Because it's the reason why we're involved with this family.
Okay. And so Mr. Wong had sent those reports. You were able to review those reports?
Yes.
And those reports were from June and July, correct?
Correct.
So that was only about a month and a half ago. Do you believe that was enough progress in that service to warrant a reunification with her child?
No.
Would you agree that there were still concerns in June that she was not, she was resistant towards the program? Is that correct?
Yes, I received that from May.
Okay. And that's almost 9 months into this case, and she's still resistant to the domestic violence services. Is that correct?
Correct.
Does that cause a concern?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And how many children does Miss Spence have? Do you know?
I believe 5.
5. Okay. And to your knowledge, does she have any custody, care, control of any of those children?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. And at the beginning of this case, there was mention of mental health issues with mom. Do you believe that she's actively engaged in controlling or managing those mental health issues?
I have not received any notes regarding her psychiatric care.
Okay. And so do you know where she's receiving her psychiatric care?
No, I do not.
Is that a conversation that you've had with Ms. Spence?
I know that she mentioned that she's been seeing the same psychiatrist for some years now. I don't know who the provider is.
Okay. Was it did Belong ever ask her to provide any updated notes on that?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the outcome of that?
I believe we have a psychiatric note from June of this year, but it doesn't state what medications she's on.
Okay, so Belong received notes, but it wasn't sufficient to address whether she's actually meeting her mental health needs. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is the department regarding Scarlett, is the department asking to terminate Ms. Spence's parental rights?
Yes.
And why are you asking that?
I believe it's in the best interest for Scarlett to remain in the home with her father. And don't believe that Ms. Spence has made sufficient progress in this legal case. Okay.
And what is the visitation schedule right now with Scarlett and Ms. Spence?
There are no visits.
And why is that?
At the last court hearing, visits were suspended, I believe due to a conversation that Scarlett had with the previous caseworker.
Okay. And to your knowledge, and after reviewing your file, what was the reason Scarlett requested that?
She felt like her mom hated her, and she felt uncomfortable whenever her mom had said that she was going to tell Katie that she was making her look bad.
Okay. And to your knowledge, has Scarlett tried to reach out to mom in any way?
Yes, Mr. Roscoe did let me know about Scarlett attempting to reach her mom on TikTok.
Okay. And when was that?
And that was this past month.
Okay, so that would have been in August of this month, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did Ms. Spence in any way reach out to you and let you know that Scarlett was trying to communicate with her?
No, not until this past week during my home visit, but she had not reached out prior.
Okay. And so how long had Ms. Spence known that Scarlett had reached out to her until she addressed that with you?
I believe it was I want to say a couple of weeks. I'm not for certain, but about a couple of weeks, a week and a half.
Okay, and when you discussed that with Ms. Benz, what did she say about the communication?
She stated that she wasn't going to deny speaking with her daughter, but I don't believe that she had said that she had reached back out to her. It was just a message that her daughter had sent her on TikTok.
Okay. Was it concerning to Belong that Ms. Benz had not shared that information with you when Scarlett reached out to her?
Yes.
And why is that concerning?
Because that was a part of the court order was no contact, no visitation at this time until Scarlett's been able to work through her trauma and therapy and have a recommendation from a therapist for that contact.
And as of today, do you have a recommendation from her therapist saying that communication with Ms. Benz is appropriate?
No, I do not.
Pass the witness, Judge.
Just one moment. I'm going to get it back into that screen. While I'm looking for that, Ms. Hernandez, do you have placement date information in front of you?
I can pull that up.
Well, you don't have to pull it up right now. I'm going to let Ms. Pearsall ask you some questions, but before we adjourn today, I want to double check that my placement dates in this system are correct, okay?
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Pearsall.
Thank you, Honor. Mr. Hernandez, has Mr. Roscoe been a victim of domestic violence from Grace?
Not to my knowledge, I've not received that.
Have you ever discussed that issue with Mr. Roscoe?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so you don't know if he has or hasn't been a victim of domestic violence?
No, I don't.
Okay. Are you aware that Mr. Benz has been a victim of domestic violence from Grace?
Yes.
On multiple occasions?
Yes.
And Scarlett has disclosed that she has been a victim of domestic violence from Grace, correct?
Correct.
And you've already testified that Grace has 5 children total as of right now.
Yes.
Okay. And are all except one of them, Paisley, verbal?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So the 4 children that are verbal, at one point or another, have each one of those 4 children outcried that they've been physically or mentally or both abused by Grace?
No, I'm not certain.
Okay. Now, this case started in part due to Grace being arrested, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that was that vehicle incident you testified about earlier?
Yes.
And during that vehicle incident, when Grace attempted to steer the vehicle into a commercial truck, was she arrested and charged with 4 counts of child endangerment?
Yes.
And was Grace Benz also charged with 1 count of deadly conduct?
Yes.
Okay. And she made an allegation at that point that Miles Benz hit her, but he wasn't arrested or charged with anything from that incident, was he?
I'm not sure.
Okay. You don't know if anything he was charged with, correct?
I don't know.
Okay, so when the police came and investigated the events, they only arrested Grace and charged her with different crimes you just testified to, correct?
Yes, that's and based on the affidavit of removal. Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, can I share a screen for a document that's previously been admitted in evidence petitioners for?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Let me know if you need me to make it bigger. I'm sharing with you Petitioner's Exhibit 4, which is Miles Benz Service Plan. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Did Mr. Benz sign his service?
Yes, I believe electronically.
Okay. So let's go over his services. Let me scroll to the beginning. Okay. So his first service plan was a parenting class. Is that correct?
Yes.
Sorry, hold on. Okay. Parenting class. Did he complete that?
Yes, he did.
Did he provide you with a certificate?
I believe he provided, yes, the previous worker with the certificate.
And you are currently the custodian of record for that certificate, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And has he been able to demonstrate to you what he has learned in parenting through his interaction with his daughter?
Yes.
Okay. And what kind of visitation does he currently have?
He has 3 hours. He had been having 3 hours unsupervised, and they've moved to a full day unsupervised as of last week.
Okay, so he's currently having all day unsupervised visits.
Correct.
And those go well?
Yes.
Is Paisley bonded to her dad?
Yes, she appears bonded to him.
Okay, does dad seem to be appropriately able to meet all of her needs?
Yes.
Okay, I believe the next concern was Mr. Benz establishing a social support system of appropriate friends, family, and professionals. As of today, has he been able to accomplish that?
Yes, he's identified his support system.
Okay, and is it appropriate?
Yes.
Okay, so you believe he's complied with that part of his service plan?
Yes.
Okay. His next task was an anger management class, correct?
Correct.
And has he been attending that?
Yes, he has.
Now, a typical anger management class is a certain number of classes that you attend, and then you get a certificate, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Benz chose to see a therapist or a psychiatrist by the name of Dr. DeFranco.
Yes.
And so he has continued that service actually since before this even got created, the service plan, until today.
Correct.
And this is a service he plans to continue regardless of whether this case is in effect or not.
Yes.
So at this point, you believe he has accomplished this goal and in fact probably over-accomplished?
Yes.
Okay. So you're satisfied that he has dealt with whatever anger management issues he had, and you believe he's continuing to deal with them in a very appropriate manner?
Yes, with that ongoing, yes.
Okay. Okay, he was asked to submit to random drug tests to address any possible concerns. Has he done that?
Yes, he has.
And there's been no drug concerns in this case as far as Mr. Benz, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. He was asked to complete a psychological evaluation.
Yes.
And has he completed that?
Yes, he has.
And there has been no additional services recommended outside of what's already in his service plan. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. He was asked to complete domestic violence. Has he done that?
Yes, he has.
Okay. And that's been finished, certificate has been provided, and you have no ongoing concerns.
That's correct.
Okay. And is that the entirety of his service plan?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing now that I've scrolled through the whole plan. So sitting here today, do you believe Mr. Benz has completed every single task asked on his service plan?
Yes.
Okay. Now, service plans are divided into two things. They're divided into tasks and goals. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain to us what is the difference between those two?
Yes. We have goals that we would like for Mr. Benz to be able to accomplish, and the tasks are what help him get there. They're services that help him work through the reason why we're involved.
Okay, so you've already testified that Mr. Benz completed all the tasks. Has he accomplished all of the goals set out by the service plan?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, in addition to finishing all the tasks which you testified, you've gone through them one by one, he's completed those. Has he also accomplished the goals on his service plan?
Yes.
And when these cases start out, the department's initial goal in every case is family reunification, correct?
Correct.
And has the department worked in this case with all three parents to attempt to reunify their respective children with that parent?
Yes.
Okay. And based on the work you've accomplished, you and your predecessors and all of the providers have accomplished throughout this case, which you're recommending today is a reunification with Mr. Roscoe of his child, correct?
It would be based off of a reunification staffing that I would have with my supervisor. We have not had that yet. It has been scheduled.
Okay, let me try my question again. Which you're recommending is a reunification with Mr. Roscoe and his child.
Yes,
correct?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I thought you meant Mr. Benz. Yes, correct.
Okay. And with Mr. Ben, subject to the reunification staffing, which is scheduled next Tuesday, I believe, correct?
Yeah, on the 5th, yes.
On the 5th, okay. You will also be seeking reunification with Mr. Benz, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But with the mother, you seeking termination of parental rights as to both of those children.
Correct.
Okay. So let me switch. Your Honor, and I'm again seeking permission to share my screen.
Okay.
And for the record, this is admitted petitioners exhibit 2, which is Grace's service. Okay. Can you see my screen, Ms. Hernandez?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And so if you look at exhibit 2, page 9, is this Grace Benz's signature on her service plan?
Yes.
Okay. And what day did she sign this plan?
November 9th, 23.
Okay. So give or take, I can't do math that well, 9-10 months ago?
Yes.
Okay. And it would be around the same date that Mr. Benz signed his plan. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And so they both had an equal amount of time to complete all of the tasks and accomplish all of the goals on their service plan, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you already testified that while Mr. Benz has accomplished it, she has not.
Correct.
Okay. Can you read for the court, and I can make it bigger if that helps you? What was the danger worry statement for that sort of started this service plan?
Yes, it says SJRC Belong understands that Grace Benz loves Scarlett and Paisley and wants to be reunified with her children. However, there is a significant concern regarding domestic violence, to include verbal and physical abuse, between Grace and Miles Benz. There have also been reports of mental breakdowns which have resulted in violence and erratic behavior. SJRC Belong is worried that without appropriate intervention and a significant change in these behaviors, Scarlett Powell and Paisley Benz could become hurt, scared, seriously injured, or even killed.
Okay. Would you agree with me that the concern that a child could be killed is a very unusual concern, even for cases involving the department?
Yes.
Okay. And concentrating on Grace, because, you know, you've testified at length about Mr. Benz. The erratic behavior that was concerning when this case started on Grace's part, has that erratic behavior continued to today?
Yes, I believe there have been continued violence between Mr. and Mrs. Benz.
Okay, but has the erratic behavior also continued between Ms. Benz and the department workers, between her and the children, between her and just multiple other people?
I have not witnessed that personally.
Have you seen that in the reports you reviewed as a custodian of record for this case?
I believe yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So going through her tasks, she was asked to complete a parenting class, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And has she completed the parenting class?
Yes, she has.
And that was the task, correct?
Correct.
What date did Ms. Benz complete the parenting class?
It was prior to me receiving the case. I don't have the date.
Okay. Now, what is the goal of completing the parenting class?
I'm sorry?
What's the goal?
The goal?
Why does the department ask parents to complete a parenting class?
To be able to gain, basic knowledge and to be able to parent their children, be able to be a nurturing parent, to learn.
Sorry, okay, keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that was it.
Okay. And so based on Grace's behavior with Paisley, in which she blamed the child and made the child feel like she hates her, do you believe that she has learned and accomplished the goals needed from this parenting class?
Objection, Your Honor. It's mischaracterization of evidence.
Your Honor, I think Ms. Pearsall is referring to Scarlett.
Oh, I am referring to Scarlett, Judge. I apologize.
Okay. I wanted the same thing myself. Overruled. You can answer it.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Based on Grace's behavior with Scarlett, where she threatened the child and just made her feel terrible about herself, I do believe Grace has accomplished the goal of this parenting class, or do you believe she has failed to accomplish those goals?
Objection, Your Honor. Again, she's mischaracterizing the evidence and sending her comments, sidebars being added, saying that she's threatened child.
Your Honor, I believe there was testimony to that.
There was testimony. Overruled. That's in evidence.
No, I don't believe that she's accomplished the goal of parenting classes.
Okay, the next task was for Ms. Grace to show that she has an appropriate support system, correct?
Correct.
Has Ms. Benz been able to prove to you that she has a support system as of today?
No, I'm unaware of Ms. Benz's support system.
Okay, and that was a required task on her plan. So she hasn't accomplished that task or that goal. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, let's talk about so I was looking for his name, Mr. McCardo for a minute. Who is Mr. McCardo to Grace?
I believe that is her boyfriend.
Okay. And she is currently pregnant with her 6th child?
Yes, ma'am.
And is Mr. McCardo the father, allegedly at least the father of the 6th child?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so she hasn't disclosed to you who is the father of this child?
Not to me, no.
Okay. Do you know how pregnant Grace is? Like how many months?
I believe she said she's 15 weeks.
So about 4 months, give or take?
Yes.
Okay. And when did she disclose to the department that her and Mr. McCardo were dating?
I'm unsure of when that was told to. I don't know if that was told to the previous worker.
Okay. When was it told to you?
During my home visit last week. or I believe maybe that was discussed in mediation as well.
Okay, so maybe a couple of weeks ago?
Yes.
Okay, so the department found out that this man exists a couple of weeks ago.
That's when I did, yes.
Okay. Has he provided, or has Grace provided Mr. Mercado's information so you could do a background check to figure out whether or not he's appropriate to be around any of the children?
No, not yet.
Is that the concern?
Yes, and I did not ask for that information during my home visit last week.
Okay, why is it a concern though that you don't know that information?
Because we do not know if he has any CPS history or criminal history.
Now, during your home visit last week, did you meet Mr. Mercado?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did you observe, like you personally saw him, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you observe that he had a gun on him the entire time you were visiting?
I believe it appeared that he had a gun on him, yes.
Okay. Is that cause you any concern?
It was not concerning. It's not something that was an issue during the visit.
Okay, but when you combine a boyfriend we know nothing about with a gun and history of violent, erratic behavior from Grace, is that combination concerned?
Yes.
Why?
We wouldn't know what could happen.
Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing Grace's service plan. Okay, what is the next concern on the plan?
Grace Spence has displayed sporadic and aggressive behavior.
Okay. And she was asked to do, I believe, random drug tests.
Yes.
Okay. And has she submitted to random drug tests?
Yes, she has.
Okay. And the only concerns on those drug tests were allegedly her prescription medication.
Yes.
Okay. Is it true that the department has been provided some, but not all of her prescriptions throughout the case?
I'm not sure what's provided prior to me getting on the case, but I have not received her medication. I haven't received her prescriptions. Okay,
so since, I'm sorry, when did you get on the case, June?
Yes, mid-June.
Okay, so since June until today, August 27th, you haven't received any verification of what she is or isn't taking?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Her next task, I'm sorry, I think I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. Okay, her next task, I believe, was a psychological, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and she did complete that?
Yes, she did.
Okay. Have you had a chance to review her psychological as a custodian of the records for this case?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And in her psychological, did Grace admit that she has a history of suffering with bipolar issues?
I'm sorry, I don't recall if that was her psychological or her psychiatric evaluation.
Okay. But you recall that in one of those she admitted to suffering with bipolar issues?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall that she also admitted that she has a history of overusing Adderall?
I do not recall that, no.
Okay. Is that something, you have a copy of her psychological evaluation, correct, in your records?
Yes, yes, I do.
You can pull up and refresh your memory with?
Yes. I can pull that up. Okay, no, I do not see. I have her evaluation pulled up.
Okay, can you look at the very first paragraph, which starts, I'm sorry, second paragraph, which starts with history of presenting problems?
Yes.
And so in it, is there a concern that Grace is on Adderall but is overusing it?
Yes. That was on the basis, the affidavit of removal.
Okay, so that was one of the concerns when this case began?
Yes.
Okay, and you would agree with me when you get a positive drug test and it's explained allegedly with an Adderall prescription, there is no way to truly measure whether it's use or overuse.
I wouldn't be able to tell that, no.
Okay. So if in fact that was one of the many concerns that started this case, this is a concern that in no way has been dealt with throughout this case either. Would you agree?
Yes, we are. I'm unaware of what prescriptions. I haven't been able to verify what prescriptions Ms. Benz is currently taking.
Okay. Now, was it also disclosed in her psychological that Ms. Benz has been previously emergency detained?
Yes.
Okay. And you will agree with me that requires a very high level of mental health behavior in order to be emergency detained by law enforcement?
Yes.
And is that a concern?
Yes.
Out of the 5 children that she has, they range in age, I believe, between, well, 1 year old and 11 years old. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And you've already testified that Ms. Ben's CPS history started 11 years ago with the birth of her oldest child, Lee. Accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Because her oldest child was the one where she was found validated for physical abuse of after that child suffered a fractured skull and multiple broken bones.
Yes.
Okay. And so every one of the children she has given birth to in the last 11 years, she does not have custody of. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And do you believe, based on her history and based on her concerning behavior over the past 11 years, terminating her parental rights is the only way to ensure Paisley's and Scarlett's safety today and in the future?
Yes, ma'am.
In addition to the car incident, does Grace have criminal history of assaults causing bodily injury?
Yes.
And does she also have 4 separate counts of injury to a family member?
I would have to pull up her criminal history. I'm sorry. I don't recall.
Okay, well, if it helps, you can flip to page 3 of her psychological and look at the legal history. That helps you refresh your memory.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Did her psychological make recommendations?
Yes, it did. Let me see.
Okay. And so what was recommended by her psychological?
The recommendations say that she appears guarded and lacks insight and tends to underreport symptoms.
Okay, what was the second recommendation?
She would benefit from continued medication management to manage her reported symptoms of depression.
Okay. And what was the third recommendation?
If the above factors are not addressed, I believe that it is very likely Grace will continue to have problems providing a safe, stable home for her children and will again encounter DFPS again for future complaints.
So first recommendation was psychotherapy. Second was medication management, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And she did go to counseling,
Yes.
and her counselor hasn't discharged her and believes she still needs ongoing therapy for at least 3 months.
Yes. She has not been discharged.
So that task and that goal has not been accomplished. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Her medication management, you have no idea what's happening because she has failed to provide you with any proof of it the entire time you've been the worker. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so the concerns that Dr. Ebony Jackson, the PhD who completed the psychological had that you just testified to, of her continuing to have problems providing safe, stable home for her children, and again, committing acts that would involve department, that concern is just as alive today as it was when this case started and when the psychological was done. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. Now I'm going to go back to sharing Exhibit 2. And this is the last requirement on her service plan. And is that the domestic violence class?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to talk about that for a minute. Now, you already testified that she signed the service plan on November 9th of 23. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And how many sessions of domestic violence total?
24.
Okay. And she didn't start this class until sometime in April, end of April of 2024?
Yes.
So why did it take her 6 months, so almost 6 months, to start her domestic violence class?
It's my understanding that she had told the previous worker that she was not a perpetrator, so was not going to take a perpetrator's course.
So she refused to participate in this class for the first 5-6 months of the case.
Yes.
And so the reason, one of the reasons she's not done with this class is she chose not to comply with the order of this court to do her services, and she chose not to attend this class for 5-6 months.
Correct.
And even after starting this class, are you aware that she has missed 2 separate sessions?
Yes.
Okay. Sitting here today, do you believe it wouldn't just be in the children's best interest, but to go back to what you read into the record on the service plan, it would prevent physical harm and potentially death to both Scarlett and Paisley, only if Grace Bentz's rights are terminated?
Correct.
And is that what you were seeking today?
Yes.
Okay. Now the questions here.
Ms. Fuller?
Your Honor, could I take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Thank
Let's go back over on 321.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Ms. Eslinger, are you ready?
I am.
All right, we can go back on the record and cause number 23-09-28697-CV in the interest of Powell. And we can continue with testimony, and just for the record and for everybody's preparation, we're going to recess at 4:15 today. And we'll come back on, I believe, the 16th. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, you can continue.
Ms. Hernandez, how long have you been a caseworker with Belong?
Since I started with Belong last year as a kinship worker, and I've been a permanency specialist since March.
And did you have, we've had a lot of discussions in regards to criminal charges and criminal cases. Have you had an opportunity to review the removal affidavit?
Yes.
And on page 2 of that affidavit, Mrs. Bentz's criminal history was 3 prior arrests for assault causing bodily injury, correct?
Yes.
And she actually completed 12 months probation.
Yes.
So the domestic violence issues have been ongoing for many years.
Correct.
So it's not just with Mr. Bentz. It has been with other paramours, other young men that she's been with.
Correct.
And you said that they completed the family-based safety services in July of 2023. Correct?
Yes.
And as Ms. Pearsall stated, each parent is given a number of tasks.
Yes.
But the goals they have to complete are different than the task itself.
Yes.
And so based on the family-based case that Mr. and Mrs. Bentz completed, do you feel that they actually learned anything from that case?
No, since just a couple months later, we're here for a legal case for those.
And the main incident on that new removal, Miss Bentz threatened to kill herself and all the children by going into oncoming traffic, correct?
Yes.
And how many children were in the car?
I believe it was the 3 older children.
So Scarlett?
Yes.
And her 2 half siblings with Mr. Nesloni?
I believe so. I would have to double check.
Okay. And in your opinion, after meeting Scarlett, do you feel that that situation had a traumatic effect on her?
Yes.
And she can vividly recall that incident?
Yes, she can.
And has she, in fact, mentioned it to more than one individual?
Yes.
To teachers, to counselors, to caseworkers. She talks about it consistently.
Yes, she has.
And in her statements to individuals, she also says that wasn't the only time this happened. Her mother has threatened to take their lives, that she wasn't going to die alone.
Correct.
Isn't that true?
Correct.
And this has happened on several occasions.
Yes.
And have the counselors been able to deal with this with Scarlett? Have they been working on this?
Yes, she is addressing this in therapy right now.
In your opinion, what effect, though, has this had on Scarlett?
I mean, if she is replaying these scenarios and has told multiple people, she's reliving it. It's been very traumatic on her.
Okay. And in regards to the incident where her mother allegedly attempted to drown her, has she also expressed that to numerous individuals?
Yes, I believe that's something that she has told the other previous caseworker and other family members.
Has she also told her counselor and teacher at her previous school in Kyle?
I'm not sure on that.
Okay. Is it your understanding that Scarlett thinks this is just normal behavior? This is how a parent acts?
Yes.
And she minimizes what her mother has done to her by saying, my mother's just a little crazy.
Yes.
And how important is it for Scarlett to understand that this is not normal behavior?
I mean, it's very important for her to know that that's not normal.
And since she's been placed in the home of Mr. Roscoe, has she thrived?
Yes, she has.
Has she been able to understand what a real family should be like?
Yes.
Has she indicated by her own words that she did not want to speak to her mother because of the feelings that she had when she had Zoom calls with her mother?
Yes.
And prior to you becoming the caseworker, her mother had an opportunity to actually have physical visits as well when she was moved to Houston with the grandmother, correct?
Yes.
And as far as you know, did she exercise those visitations?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. And so again, then Scarlett was placed in New York. And did you receive since you got the case, she has not had contact with Scarlett, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so in your opinion, has the department provided all the necessary services in an attempt to reunify these children with Miss Benz?
Yes.
Do you think there was anything else that you could have provided to her in an attempt to salvage this family?
No, I don't.
And based on her previous criminal history of assault, of child endangerment, and continued issues with her mental health breakdowns, do you feel that these children would be in danger if they were returned to her?
Yes, I do.
And even in supervised visitation, she has had difficulty maintaining her composure, correct?
Yes, with Scarlett, yes.
And in regards to her visits, how old is Paisley?
Paisley, she's a year old.
Okay. And she can't defend herself, correct?
Correct.
She can't make a phone call if something was going on?
Correct.
She can't go to a neighbor if something happened?
Correct.
And as far as you know with Scarlett, she did go to a neighbor in regards to the drowning incident, correct?
Yes.
And there's police reports that authenticate that, correct?
Yes.
Did you ever have the opportunity to discuss with her the choking incident or see any documentation about that?
With Scarlett?
Yes, with Scarlett.
No, I haven't.
Okay. And in regards to Scarlett's mental health issues because of this relationship with her mother, how would you describe her ability to focus and to handle situations?
It's been explained and I've observed Scarlett does not have a good attention span. She kind of is all over the place at times. I know that specifically with the trauma of what she's remembered, that's something that she's addressing in therapy.
And these are significant incidents. They're not just minor, either verbal abuse or minor incidents. These are pretty significant, correct?
Yes.
These are life-threatening situations.
Yes.
For Scarlett.
Yes.
Obviously, Paisley cannot speak, so she can't even tell us what has happened to her, correct?
Correct.
And initially, did you see paperwork where there was a concern that Paisley might have some kind of prior injury to her shoulder or to her arm because she was having difficulty in some of the visits or difficulty raising her arm?
Yes.
And so there was a skeletal survey done on her, correct?
Yes.
And as far as you know, she's doing better?
Yes, she is.
She's working through it?
Yes.
But there was no injuries indicated?
No, there weren't.
In your viewing of the case, was there a concern about Mrs. Benz's postpartum depression or her activities while she was pregnant that caused concern?
Yes.
And has Ms. Benz indicated herself that she suffers from extreme postpartum depression?
Yes, I believe that is in her evaluations.
In regards to some of the incidents while Ms. Benz was pregnant that have been documented, did she in fact threaten to kill herself and her unborn child on more than one occasion?
Yes.
And even though she was emergency detained on at least one, maybe two occasions prior to the removal, she has continued to be erratic since the removal.
Yes.
And was there an incident involving Mr. Bentz where Grace Bentz broke out the window of his car.
Yes.
And that was since this case started, correct?
Yes.
Do you know how far into the case we were when this happened?
I do not know.
Okay. But during the case, also, Mr. Bentz's house was ransacked and items were taken and walls were destroyed. And this allegedly was Miss Bentz as well.
Objection, Your Honor. Mischaracterization is the house being Miles Bentz's house.
But that's not a mischaracterization, Your Honor, because the house is Mr. Bentz's. The land is Miss Bentz's, is my understanding.
They both own the house, Your Honor. That's already been.
Hasn't been established here, Your Honor.
Well,
It's the house Mr. Bentz resides in, if that helps clarify it.
then let's just clarify it on the record is we're talking about the house that Mr. Bentz lives in, correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay.
Ms. Hernandez, were you aware of the damage to the house in Divine?
Yes.
And were there police reports that indicated that the property was stolen and things were damaged?
Yes.
And again, this was during this case.
Correct.
So the goal is always reunification, but this case has had a number of obstacles, correct?
Yes.
And Ms. Bentz has failed to address her serious mental health issues, correct?
Yes.
And she hasn't even provided the department along with any documentation to show that she's actually stable and doing well.
Correct. I have not received her prescriptions.
And you have asked for those, correct?
I believe during the last meeting with the previous worker that was requested.
Okay. But you mentioned that you had only seen Ms. Bentz on one occasion, and that was last week, correct?
Yes.
But you've been the worker since June.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you were not allowed to meet with her unless her attorney was present, correct?
Yes.
And so that became an obstacle in this case, correct?
Yes.
Isn't it important for the worker that's involved to be able to meet one-on-one with each parent to determine if they're able to meet the needs of their children?
Yes.
And so you really haven't been able to make an assessment of Ms. Bentz because you were not allowed to meet with her one-on-one.
Correct. The visit that I had scheduled with her, it was canceled by her attorney's office.
And so the only time you met last week, that wasn't just you and her. I was present, Casa was present,
Yes.
Mr. Mercado and Mr. Wong, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So again, the goal is always reunification. Can you please detail for the court why it's not appropriate at this time for any type of reunification with Ms. Grace Bentz?
Yes, she has not completed her service plan. She hasn't been able to show the department that she has made changes to her behaviors to be able to be protective of the girls.
And again, these are the situations are pretty volatile, correct?
Yes.
And these children cannot protect themselves against someone who hasn't dealt with their own demons.
Correct.
In regards to Mr. Roscoe, do you feel that he should be the sole managing conservator of Scarlett and there not be any rights given to Ms. Bentz?
Yes.
And do you feel Mr. Roscoe can meet all of her needs?
Yes.
And that he has done everything in his power to make that adjustment and provide for Scarlett since she has been placed in his home since March?
Yes.
So do you have any concerns at this time regarding Mr. Roscoe?
No, I don't.
And his case was already staffed for reunification. He's already has reunification with his daughter.
Yes, he does.
Do you feel that there's anything that can be done to facilitate a relationship with Ms. Bentz at this point in the case?
No, I don't.
Do you think that every effort has been done by Mr. Roscoe as well to try to facilitate a relationship
Yes.
with Ms. Bentz?
Yes.
And prior to you becoming the worker, there were opportunities that Mr. Roscoe tried to get Scarlett to talk to her mother, correct?
Yes.
And she refused to talk to her on more than one occasion prior to us stopping the visitation.
Correct.
And on several occasions, Ms. Bentz had to be redirected because her conversations were inappropriate.
Yes.
And did you have an opportunity to review those notes when you became the caseworker?
Yes.
And besides the incidents of tell me you love me over and over, and were there any other incidents that you can remember at this time and want to make the court aware of?
No, not at this time.
Okay. And as far as Mr. Bentz, do you feel that he has worked through the issues that brought his child into care?
Yes, I do.
And do you feel that the professionals that he sees have addressed the serious concerns about the domestic violence with him and Ms. Bentz?
Yes.
And to be fair, it wasn't one-sided. It was both Mr. Bentz and Mrs. Bentz, correct?
Correct.
But he was very forthcoming with all of his providers, correct?
Yes.
He shared his role in the disputes and has worked through and tried to determine what he will need to do to provide a safe and stable home for his daughter.
Yes.
And does he have the support from, let me go back. Mr. Roscoe has the support of his family?
Yes, he does.
And he has a family in Texas as well?
Yes.
And it's really important for Scarlett to have contact with her half-siblings, correct?
Correct.
And are you aware, or has it been brought to your attention, that Mr. Roscoe is more than willing to keep that contact with the half-siblings?
Yes.
And in fact, they had an opportunity to visit with Mr. Roscoe and Scarlett over the summer.
Yes, they did.
And did you have any negative feedback about that?
No.
Okay. And then Mr. Bentz, what is his support system?
His support system is his family, the firing squad that he works with, and also Paisley's current placement.
And Paisley's current placement is who?
It's Emily Venegas.
And that is in fact Mr. Bentz's ex-wife, correct?
Yes.
And do you feel that situation with Paisley being in that home has been helpful for Mr. Bentz to be able to get on the right track to learn what issues he needed to deal with as well?
Yes.
Okay. And in regards to, I want to go back to Ms. Bentz's psychological evaluation. There's a scale on the back of the psychological evaluation, a validity scale. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
And so on the lying score, she had a 10, which says it meets or exceeds the cutoff for lying on the validity scale, correct?
Yes.
On the response distortion index, it says on faking good, it said 10, lie, that she met the index of lying on faking that everything was good. Yes?
Yes.
Is that what it says? So Miss Bentz has been able to, I guess, fake it for a while. Correct, Ms. Hernandez?
Yes, that is what. Yes.
But in your opinion today, has she learned anything throughout the last, 10 years of involvement with CPS?
No, ma'am.
And there has been at least 8 referrals involving her and her children based on the removal affidavit?
Yes.
And the majority of those referrals were serious incidents of mental health issues, domestic violence, and violence in itself,
Yes.
and physical abuse. Do you think there's any opportunity for Ms. Bentz to be appointed possessory conservator or even a non-possessory conservator in this case with regards to these 2 children?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I'm asking if you think that, let me rephrase. You feel that termination is in the best interest, correct?
Yes.
So in your opinion, there is not an opportunity based on Ms. Bentz's history and the services that have been provided to her where she could actually even be a possessory conservator having visitation, or even a non-possessory where she doesn't have visitation because she hasn't even learned how to control her violence or work on her mental health.
Correct.
I know that was a long question. I'm sorry. Got carried away with that. And so you're asking today for the court to terminate her rights on both children and appoint the fathers as the managing conservators. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, and in reference to Mr. Bentz, it would be a reunification staffing based on that.
Okay. And do you feel that the fathers in this case have shown that they can provide a safe and stable home for these children?
Yes.
I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Mr. McKeska, we've had Ms. Shope come back. And so I don't know if we want to ask Ms. Hernandez more questions and finish that out. We've got about 30 minutes left today.
Judge, I think that finishing with Ms. Hernandez would probably be the prudent thing to do, just so we're not interrupting her testimony and then having to come back to it like we would have to do with Ms. Shuffs.
I think that's fine, and I agree with you. So do you have redirect?
I don't, Judge.
All right. Any recross for Ms. Hernandez by any party?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Wong.
Ms. Hernandez, you mentioned that Grace had not provided you with any prescription information. Can you confirm you did not request that of her? Is that correct?
I did not know. Last week was my initial meeting with her.
Had you requested that prior to the meeting last week?
I had not.
Sorry, so you had not, correct?
No, I had not.
And I believe there was a meeting scheduled in July that had to be rescheduled with you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I know you mentioned that it was because my office called you, but what was the reason? Were you given a reason for why that meeting was canceled?
I was told that she had a minor medical emergency.
And do you know if that was related to her current pregnancy?
I don't know. I wasn't given any information.
Okay. And then you also mentioned that there was erratic behavior between Miles and Grace, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, that's not what you testified to.
Sustained.
Was there, in your opinion, erratic behavior amongst Grace and Miles Bentz?
I'm sorry. So for the removal or?
After the removal, sorry.
Yes, there was erratic behavior by Ms. Bentz.
Was there not also continued violence caused by Miles as well?
Objection asked and answered in his direct on his cross.
Sustained.
You mentioned that, or it was brought up in your testimony that Joe had a gun at the house visit. Was that something you actually verified and confirmed and you saw? Or is that just something Ms. Pearsall alleges?
That was something that I, myself, Casa, and Ms. Fuller observed.
Okay, so you observed him with a gun. What type of gun was it?
I'm not sure.
Can you describe it? Was it a pistol? Was it a rifle? Shotgun?
Ask and answer.
No, I haven't heard that yet. Overruled.
I don't know what type of gun it was.
Can he ask you to describe it? Can you describe it?
No, I couldn't describe it.
Could it have been a flashlight?
I'm not sure.
But so how did you know that it was a gun?
I don't know that for a fact that it was a gun.
And did you feel that Mr. Mercado was threatening in any way?
No.
When you were in the home, was it something where you asked to, search the house, or were there any firearms in the residence?
Not that I observed.
Okay. Did you ask if there were any firearms present?
No, I didn't.
And during the visit, was Joe evasive in any of your questions with him?
No.
Did he provide answers to the questions that you were asking?
I did not ask Mr. Mercado questions during my visit.
Was there anything Mr. Mercado needed to provide to CPS?
No, I did not ask for anything at that visit.
And when you visited the residence, can you describe the residence? How many rooms were there?
Yes, it was 3 bedrooms.
And what was the arrangement for the bedrooms?
You're not going to object this outside the scope.
Sustained.
And a less restrictive option than termination would be Grace as a possessor conservator, correct?
Objection asked and answered and outside the scope.
Sustained.
What other services is Grace required to complete?
Objection asked and answered.
And Your Honor, we're at the termination trial, and extra services, that's irrelevant at this point.
Sustained.
You mentioned that Grace was bipolar. Would it be an accurate statement that from what you were reviewing, it was both Grace and Miles recognized they were bipolar?
Objection, Your Honor. It's an out of court statement.
What was your objection?
It's hearsay. It's an out of court statement. He's talking about something that Grace said. And so it's one thing when she admits things about herself. It's something different.
I don't agree with you. If it's an out of court statement, it's not hearsay if it's a party opponent statement. It doesn't matter what the intention is. It's a party opponent statement, so it's not hearsay. Overruled.
Well, Your Honor, it's hearsay because it's from a document that's not in evidence.
But it's a statement of a party opponent.
In the document that hasn't been admitted into evidence.
Well, he can rephrase his question and ask if she said it. I mean,
correct. Did Miles Bentz say that he was also bipolar?
In the removal affidavit, it states bipolar issues.
And also in the psychological evaluations, they both admitted.
Yes, I believe. Yes, information from the affidavit was in the psychologicals.
And you mentioned an instance where Grace threatened to kill her unborn child. What were the circumstances with that communication?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I'm not.
Do you know what the circumstances were when
No,
Grace said that she threatened to kill her unborn child?
No, I don't.
And so you don't know what the surrounding, what was surrounding that statement, what was going on, correct?
No.
I'll pass.
Any other recross?
Yes, Your Honor, just one question.
Go ahead.
Ms. Hernandez, you testified that part of Mr. Ben's large support system was his firing squad. I just want to clarify that's because he's a fireman who works for the fire department.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I just wanted to clear what a firing squad means. No other questions.
Your
I
Honor,
heard that too, and I think it's appropriate that you cleared it up for the record because it did come off a little weird. What were you going to say, Ms. Fuller?
I had a couple questions, but I know Mr. Saldivar's next. Sorry.
Okay.
No further questions, Judge.
I think you don't have to wait, Ms. Fuller. It's all you.
So, Ms. Hernandez, in regards to the incident in the home last week, did Ms. Spence indicate to all of us that Mr. Mercado lived in the home with her?
Yes. Yes.
But that's not the information we're being provided now? Have you been given other information at this point?
No.
And in regards to the gun incident, did Mr. Mercado have a gun strap holster on him?
Yes.
And whatever was inside that holster, you couldn't tell exactly what type of gun, correct?
Correct.
But it wasn't a flashlight holster, was it?
No.
I mean, he had it on his shoulder, down his side, correct?
Yes.
And are you aware that Miss Bentz has a protective order against her where she's not allowed to be around firearms, correct?
I was not aware of that, no.
Okay, so are you aware that there is a protective order against her? Okay. Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Any other questions for Ms. Hernandez?
No, Your Honor.
All right. She's going to remain in the hearing, correct?
Yes, Judge. She is the representative of the department.
Okay. We got 18 minutes left. Do you want to continue with Ms. Show or?
Judge, I know that you had some other issues you wanted to discuss. So if we have a drop dead time of 4:15, I would just ask maybe we pick Ms. Show's testimony up at our next hearing date. That way we have time to flesh out those other issues.
Okay. Well, that next hearing date is going to be September 16th at 9:30. September 16th at 9:30. And it'll be by Zoom, the Monday docket.
Your Honor, can I ask that we start at 10? I'm available all day. I just have one conflict at 9:30.
You always do. Yes, we can start at 10. That's fine.
And are we going all day?
No.
Oh.
We don't need all day. I don't see how another full day of testimony is going to behoove any of us in this particular case. I want to make sure that you all have your opportunity to make the record as complete as you want it to be. But there's been quite a bit of evidence that came in today that is directly relevant to the issue at hand. And I'm going to give you all more time, but I don't think we need another 8 hours on this. Does anybody want to explain to me why we might need 8 hours?
Because there's numerous attorneys, unfortunately, on this case, so that I would think that it would take a while, but.
And Your Honor,
Well, I
this is still a
understand there's
termination
numerous
case involving
attorneys, but-
my client.
I'm
She needs
sorry?
this is obviously a termination case involving my client's rights, and she wants to be able to have all of her evidence be able to be presented.
Well, what are you going to present? Give me an idea of what witnesses we still need to call and what evidence still needs to be presented in this case.
Well, she obviously has to testify. She needs to be able to explain her situation, Your Honor. We still have Mr. Bentz and Mr. Roscoe, and then, depending on what other circumstances, arise, from today's hearing, there may be others, but, at a minimum, Ms. Bentz is going to take a decent chunk of time.
Well, and I understand that we have other parents involved. I just want to make sure everybody understands that if we're getting into duplicitous information that's just coming from another person, but it's the same information, we're not going to do that all day long. So be very particular about what evidence you think the court still needs to hear. There's been a lot today that I think we probably could have been more efficient with. So keep that in mind. We will have the day, but if I feel like we're getting to a point where we're just going in circles or I'm hearing the same thing over and over and over again, I'm going to let you know. What else do we need to talk about?
Your Honor, if we could get a witness list or if there's any other exhibits, I'd like to have them ahead of time.
I think that's appropriate, so I'm going to go ahead and make that order. It's August 27th. We're coming back on September the 16th. So we'll look at a calendar. We have a holiday within this period. So I understand that's going to cut down on some time here. But I think having a witness list, exchanging witness lists for anybody else that you think might be called by September the 4th. If you have anything else, like today we had an instance with, we're looking at reports. We want to make sure that everybody had a copy of it. Let's get all that done before the 4th. Let's not spend time on Monday the 16th reading things that we could read in anticipation of trial. So if any of you have anything else that you think is going to potentially come up like that, then let's exchange that information. Now, that being said, we've already commenced trial, so the rules of civil procedure as far as exhibits and things, that stands. So you can't bring in new exhibits or anything that you didn't already list for the parties prior to the trial setting. I'm just talking about recorded recollection, things of that nature. Anything else?
Yeah.
No? Okay.